Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see, what if Harry Potter was the Emperor of Time Dilation? Before we start, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. Now enjoy the video. Harry awoke to a brightness. So, this was death? He contemplated, observing his surroundings. He seemed to be at King's Cross Station, only cleaner and brighter. There was no one else, only him and the vast empty space. He walked around a bit, the echoes of footsteps slicing through the silence. He had no idea what was happening. Was this heaven? Were his parents here? His thoughts were interrupted when he felt a chill in the air. His skin prickled to the cold and a shiver stroked down his spine. The station dimmed and he could have sworn there was a thin layer of fog. He took in a shuddered breath and turned around. Behind him suddenly was a figure shrouded in black robes, its ripped ends flowing in a non-existent breeze. It was floating on nothing, and its face was covered by shadows from its hood. It reminded him of a Dementor, only more elegant. It was Death. "Very good, Master, you figured that out quickly," Death's ominous voice echoed through the silence. Harry took a sharp breath, looking shocked. "So I was right, you are Death," Harry stated. "Where are my parents?" he asked in a desperate voice. "You may see them later, if you wish," Death replied. "But there are things I must tell you beforehand." "And what is that?" Harry questioned warily. Death wanting to tell someone something didn't sound reassuring that it would be good news. "Well, how about I show you?" Death decided, and Harry was suddenly in a dark room. The room suddenly lit up, and he recognized it as Dumbledore's office. Harry came to the conclusion that this was Death's version of a pensieve. What Harry saw, he would never forget, memories of Dumbledore looking over the prophecy and realizing Harry would have to die in the end. Dumbledore watching Harry, and not intervening in the yearly confrontations, hoping Harry would defeat him on his own. Dumbledore sending him to his relatives even knowing about the abuse, knowing he'd be more submissive. Ron, only wanting to be friends with him for his scar on his head. For the attention he brought and the benefits of his fame. Ginny, who only liked him for his fame and money. Hermione, who stood by both even knowing this, not truly valuing the friendship. Thinking him as dumb, and dependent on her because she was smart. No, this isn't going to be the overblown bashing where they are monsters and are being paid or anything, and Harry has no blocks on him. Harry felt hollow. The friendships he so valued had been so shallow on their part, and the man he looked up to as a grandfather raised him as a pig for slaughter. He felt tears prickle his eyes as he realized how much time he spent with them, only to know it meant little on their end. What he didn't expect was for a cold, bony hand to wipe the tears away, then to be pulled into a chilled embrace. Harry, who had gone most of his life without love, hugged Death back desperately trying to rein his emotions. When he calmed down, letting out a shaky breath, he looked directly at Death. "So, what now? Should I pass on with this knowledge?" Harry questioned, finally thinking straight again. His voice was cold and hard, void of the love and care he once held onto. "That is an option, however, you have more choices than most, Master," Death told him. The black room started fading back to the station they were in prior. "Does you calling me Master have something to do with it?" Harry inquired, confused. "Yes, it does, Master. You see, you died possessing all three Hallows, thus making you my master," Death informed him. Harry quirked an eyebrow at that. He now realized Death was right. He owned the wand when he disarmed Draco, he had the stone in the snitch, and he had the invisibility cloak since he was 11. "Okay then, what are these options?" he asked Death, curious what he could do with this. "Well, you have a few choices. You can pass on and start your new life, you can join me and reign the underworld, or you can start a second chance and return to your life with your new knowledge," Death said to him. Harry was shocked by that. He didn't even need to think. He could do this over. He could live his life the way he always wanted. "I see you've already chosen Master," Death chuckled. Harry never thought Death would act so human. Yes, I'd like to go back, Harry said confidently. He was excited to live this the way he wanted. Your wish is my command, Master. Now there are a few things you should know beforehand. Firstly, you are my master, which will come with many benefits. Unless you wish it, you cannot die. You will simply return here for a moment before I send you back to where you came, damage-free. Secondly, I will give you a couple gifts. 1. Being eidetic memory. You will remember everything you've ever experienced. 2. Natural occlumency and legilimency. You can read anyone's mind no matter their occlumency skill, and your own shields will be impenetrable. 3. I'll be always available in your mind if you ever have questions or need knowledge, for death knows all. 4. You will unlock traits that were too weak in the bloodline. You will be a metamorphagus, a parcel mage, and your magical level will be at the highest possible. And lastly, the Horcrux within you cannot be removed, but will no longer hurt you. You have full control over your connection to Voldemort. Harry absorbed all this information in. Well, this will be an interesting life. Okay then, I'm ready. Very well, Master, I'll speak to you in the future. And with a bow, Death left. Then with sparks of magic, Harry is swallowed in light and everything goes white. Chapter 1. The first thing Harry is aware of is a thud and a broken scream of James. His father was just murdered. Harry wanted to cry, he didn't want to experience this again, but it wasn't a choice. He was then aware of his mother holding him tight to her chest. Harry gazed up to see tear-glazed eyes, its bright green mirroring his own. This was his beloved mother. Not having much control of his small body, Harry could barely do anything much to his distress, but he tried anyways. "M-mom-u-m-i-l lu-lav-yo-u," he stuttered out. His mum looked at him with shock for a moment before giving him a quivering smile and wrapping her arms tighter around him. "Mama loves you too, sweetheart. I love you so much, don't ever forget that," she whispered out, her face streaming with tears. There was some crashes and his mother put him in the crib to face her death. Harry wanted to desperately stop it, but he could not. He shut his eyes, not wanting to experience the pain of losing his parents again. He heard the begging and pleading, the spell hitting her with a scream, and the thud of his other parent. He knew it was his turn. Harry looked up with his glazed eyes and stared at the wand in front of him. What he didn't expect was a murmured apology. "I'm sorry, little one, but I have to finish what I started, and I can't allow anything to stop me." The tone was quiet, and even a little sad. Harry was completely shocked. A heartless monster wouldn't apologize that way. He then watched as the spell was whispered out, only to deflect back at him. Before he knew it, he lost conscious. Harry woke up to realize he was in the stupid basket in front of the Dursleys. Oh, how he wished he could get revenge on them, but that wasn't worth it. He still hadn't reined his limbs well, but his magic was powerful. He managed to apparate to the only location he was currently aware of. Grimmauld Place. When he landed in a bedroom, his bedroom, he focused his metamorphagus abilities to make himself older. It was taxing to do without practice, but in a couple of minutes he appeared to be a 6-year-old boy. He decided to alter his appearance to something more appealing than he used to look. He had straight, slightly long hair reaching down his neck, and his features were soft but defined, making him look sophisticated. His body seemed lean and tall for his age, and he no longer needed the horrid glasses. He looked cute but with an air of intensity. The older body made it easier to control his limbs, so he spent some time relearning basic tasks, such as walking, talking, and writing. Once he figured everything out, which was rather easy for him, he climbed into the grimy bed and fell asleep. When he opened his eyes the next morning, it took him a moment to realize he wasn't dreaming and to look around in nostalgia. The room was nearly identical to the way it used to be. Or would be. He was confused with the time traveling. He was heading downstairs when he was grabbed from behind by small, blistered hands, and the screeching of "Intruder! Intruder!" broke his eardrums. Harry, being annoyed, blasted the elf away with pure magic and screamed back. "Shut up, creature. My name is Harry Potter, and I am your master, as serious as my godfather. Now stop screaming." Harry yelled. Creature looked at him with wide, bulging eyes. I'm sorry, master. What shall Creature do for master? The house elf croaked out as if it physically hurt to call him master. Well, first make me an English breakfast, then clean my room. After that I want you to go shopping for ingredients for food and potions, as well as gardening supplies for potion plants. Harry ordered in an authoritative voice. Of course, master. Creature replied, still looking as if it pained him, and disappeared. Harry sighed and headed to the kitchen, where in a couple minutes Creature popped in with his breakfast. Harry ate slowly while contemplating his plan for the day. He was going to Gringotts first. Obviously, then he'd head to Diagon and possibly Nocturne for some things. Afterward, he'd set up the house and start training. Then a thought occurred to him. Sirius, Remus, and Snape. Harry would absolutely not let his godfather rot in that hellhole. He knew he could attempt to locate a lawyer to get him out, but with his age that'd be difficult. Remus, he knew he could contact simply by owl and ask to meet him, though he'd be confused by his age, so maybe not. He settled on simply meeting him in person to explain. Lastly was Snape. He died a hero, and Harry regretted not getting along with him. He was surely going to fix that this time around. He knew he had a weakness for his mother now, so he could simply contact him over information on his mother, or he could just meet him like Remus. He'd decide depending on his loyalty towards Dumbledore. With that settled, Harry apparated out to Gringotts. Chapter 2. Harry apparated directly in front of the bank. His eyes flashed, remembering how it was destroyed by him and his so-called friends. He took a deep breath and headed inside. Due to his short height, he weaved through the crowd rather easily. He made his way to the front desk where the head goblin was working. Greetings, sir. I'd like to access my vault through a blood test, Harry informed in his childish voice. The goblin looked down and sneered at him. The goblin clearly looked down on him due to his age. And why are you not with a guardian to do so, young one? It drawled back, seemingly reluctant. I don't think that is any of your business. Just give me a blood test, he stated less innocently and rather firm. The goblin gave him a nasty look but proceeded to show him to a small room. It gave him a dagger and instructed him to drop some blood on the parchment. He did so without hesitation, which the goblin's eyes reflected respect to. Blood test. Name: Harry James Potter, July 31, 1980. Parents: Mother: Lily J. Evans, deceased. Father: James F. Potter, deceased. Lordships: Potter Black Peverell N.A. No overpowered crazy Harry who has all the power in the world. The goblin was shocked. Not only was this boy Harry Potter, who was supposedly a baby, but by the Peverell lordship that hadn't shown up in anyone for the past hundreds of years. Now, I'd like to access my vault, Harry stated. The stunned goblin silently led them to the vault and waited in the cart as Harry jumped off to take his withdrawal. Harry was dumbstruck by the amount of treasure inside. Death wasn't joking when it said it had left him with things. In front of him was piles of millions of galleons, a bookshelf full of mysterious books, and boxes of ancient artifacts. Efficiently, Harry pulled out a satchel with strong extension charms he grabbed on his way here, and proceeded to pile hundreds of galleons inside, along with the ancient tomes he was interested in reading. Secrets behind death magic, and the ancient art of necromancy, particularly stood out to him. He let out a scoff. A few hours ago, before meeting death, he would have never so much as glanced at these books. But now? He wanted to live his life the way he wanted. He wanted to learn, to experience, to grow the way he wasn't allowed to. Snapping out of stupor when he realized he was suffocating the air with his magic, he reined it in and grabbed a map in one of the boxes with the keys and lists of properties he had. Scanning it, he decided to stay in one of the cottages that was heavily warded. He tucked it under his coat and made his way out. He paid the goblin for his test, and simply walked out, ignoring the still frozen goblin. He made his way out of the bank and turned to head down Diagon Alley. Harry, now knowing he was loaded in riches, decided to get some supplies he didn't request from Creature. He first headed to some clothes shops and bought handcrafted attire. There was no need to dress in the rags he was forced into as a child. He ended up with dragonhide jackets and boots, acromantula silk robes, and some expensive magic-warded suits with weapon pockets. The workers cooed at his adorableness, which he nearly sneered at but refrained from doing so. He had to remain innocent. After all, his outfits all screamed pureblood. He was going to learn the traditions this time around. Looking back, he realized why purebloods hated Muggleborns. They come into their world judging and changing their way of life. You couldn't blame them for disliking their existence. He was not going to be clueless this time. Perhaps he'll make a few allies with some mannerism and charm. He then strolled down to the bookstore. As soon as he entered, he was in heaven. The truth was, he loved learning, but with Ron's constant nagging, he never really had the chance to read in. Hermione's lecturing when he did have a book was irritating as hell. He grabbed dozens of books on all kinds of subjects, paid, then proceeded to shrink them wandlessly. To the shock of the clerk, and leaving, he made a couple more stops, first to get a custom trunk. His new trunk was warded so only his Parseltongue password could open it, and had several expansion charms to not only fit half the Hogwarts library, but several potion stores and wardrobes. It was a smooth green velvet with pure silver rims and had a metal snake wrapped around it. The trunk would also weigh nearly nothing and could fall off the astronomy tower without damage. He bid the man farewell after receiving his trunk, with a long, long wait, and went to his last stop. He quietly headed down to Nocturne Alley, along with some notice-me-not charms to avoid creeps. He made his way to a sketchy shop, with a sign that only stated wands. He opened the creaking door and entered the dreary shop. The walls stacked with strange ingredients and the floorboards squeaked each step. Everything had a layer of dust on it, and the only light available was the two cracked windows in the front. Suddenly he felt a presence behind him and turned around to see a young witch. She looked about 20, with dark purple robes and long messy hair reaching down her back. She gave him a small smile. "Hello, young one. Here for a wand?" she asked in a baby voice. Squashing his annoyance, he simply nodded. "Great. So, I'll explain this quickly. Step into the middle of the room and let your magic out. Slowly move your hand around the room and the proper cores and woods will fly into your hand," she informed him. Harry nodded again and closed his eyes. He felt his magic fill the room to the brink. Everything felt light and floaty, and calm waves of magic washed over him. He took a deep breath and waved his hand around the room. He could hear different clashes of bottles, and next thing he knows he has a core and a piece of wood in his hand. "Ah, interesting lad, Dementor's cloak and blackthorn. Both incredibly dark and symbolizes death. Now I'm sure you'd like this untraced?" she asked with a raised eyebrow. Harry nodded once again, and she clapped. "Great, come back in 5, I'll help you then." Without another word, she grabbed the materials and headed behind the desk. Harry decided to explore Nocturne again, still with his charms in place. The streets, unlike Diagon, were empty and dirty. The floor was covered in grime and the shops looked half abandoned. He went into some artifact-filled stores and started scouting. Ignoring the creepy stare of the worker, he made his way to the weapons to look for something suitable. He wasn't going to take any chances, even if he was immortal. Nothing stood out to him until he saw a peculiar black box. He opened the lid to see the most exquisite daggers he'd ever seen. They were shiny, reflecting like a mirror, and had a shimmer of gold. The dagger was sharp and long, but with a beautiful handle. The handle had 2 snakes intertwined around it with emeralds as eyes. The knife had runes engraved into it, and the note in the box said it has a tether to him and had poison. Absorbed inside, he quickly grabbed the box and was about to purchase it when something else caught his eye. In the jewelry section was a small, gorgeous ear cuff. It was matte black in the shape of a serpent, wrapping around the rim of ear. Hanging on the tail was a small teardrop-shaped emerald, the exact shade of his eyes. He delicately picked it up and decided to purchase it. Heading to the cashier, they silently cashed them in. The best part of Nocturne was no one asked questions, and he headed back to the wand store with his things. He made a note when passing a pet shop window to find Hedwig his beloved owl again when he was 11, and to purchase a snake as well for a familiar. He grabbed his wand, which was gorgeous. The smooth black wand had vines curling in a spiral with tiny leaves spurting out, and the handle had little diamonds engraved inside the edges. He bid the women farewell after paying for the wand. Even to him a custom wand was expensive, and apparated home. Directly in his bedroom, he put away all his purchases in his new trunk, organized the books by subject and alphabet, then went to check on his requests. On the kitchen table was boxes of labeled potion ingredients, and inside his cabinets was a load of food in all varieties. Peeking outside the garden, he saw all the plants potted and growing. Satisfied, he requested Creature to make some dinner, and he headed upstairs to do some planning. He realized that due to his physical age, it wouldn't be a good idea to contact Padfoot or Mooney. Even worse, Snape. He settled on getting a secret trial for Sirius. In turn he'd kidnap him after his trial to explain. Devising a plan, he would simply apparate to the Weasleys, steal the rat, and imperio him to turn himself in. He'd use his abilities to disguise as an inspector, then take him when he is released. He knew he could trust Sirius with his secrets, and he was the closest thing he had his family. The one person he knew would understand and support him was his godfather. He truly cared deeply for him, so he could only hope he'd accept the path he has chosen. Remus was another story. While he knew the man, they weren't close, and he still felt betrayed. He never looked for him while he suffered at the hands of his relatives. That made him reluctant to contact him. However, he knew he cared as he showed him in third year, and perhaps he could build a relationship with the man. He decided to wait till he met with Sirius. Snape, he settled for waiting till Hogwarts. He had no clue how loyal he was to Dumbledore, and the man would assume he was an imposter without reason. There was no way he'd suffer through that nonsense. And so, he made his plans, and headed down to dinner with a book on death magic in his hands. Chapter 3. Harry spent the next few months learning and practicing his magical abilities. While he felt bad letting Sirius rot in that place, he knew he couldn't afford releasing him without precaution in case things go wrong. From death magic, necromancy, potions, healing, parcel magic, to dueling, he was building a skill level surpassing most trained aurors. The boosts that death gave him was truly some help. In time, with the access of the Black Library, he read and memorized thousands of books with the help of eidetic memory. He had a set schedule. Every morning he'd wake 5 o'clock sharp to work out after breakfast. He'd then spend a few hours on reading before lunch, then finish the day with hands-on work in spells, dueling, and brewing. His cycle repeated for a long while before he was confident in his dueling and hand-to-hand combat. He decided it was finally time to reunite with Sirius. Harry decided to leave his wand at home and do this as quick as possible. Eyes shining with determination, he shadowed into the burrow, hidden in the dark thanks to death magic. Once he got a hand on shadowing, he realized it was much more convenient than apparating, as it was silent and stealthy. Looking forward, he detected the traitor's magic. Sleeping on Ron's bed. It seemed the Weasleys weren't home, much to his convenience. With a wave of his hand, he watched as the rat froze for a moment before scurrying off the bed and out a crack towards the ministry. Satisfied, he shadowed home. There he contacted Death for the first time. Death? He thought inside his head. Harry suddenly felt a presence in his mind, similar to Snape during the legilimency lessons, only gentle and calming. A familiar chill that he'd grown to enjoy in his practice embraced him, and the low rumble of Death echoed his head. "Yes, Master?" Death asked. Harry smiled, grateful for all Death had done for him. Why Tom Riddle was so scared of Death he had no clue. "Could you tell me when Sirius's trial will take place?" he inquired, though he was unsure if Death could know the future. "It is complicated, Master. When a choice is inevitable, the future is outlined. However, when indecisive, it will overlap. While others' decisions will not cause this distortion, yours will, as you can change the future. Now to your original point. His trial will take place in 2 weeks at 8. He will be released as not guilty. Death replied. Harry let out a sigh of relief. He'd get his godfather soon. Harry was excited. He missed Sirius the most out of everyone. His death was single-handedly the most painful experience he ever had. He took in a shuddered breath. The pale face, the light leaving his eyes, his body shriveling before disappearing within the veil away from his grasp. Shaking his head rapidly, he tried to forget the painful memory. He spent the rest of the day in an oddly depressed mood but continued with his training. On the whim, he decided to brew dozens of wolfsbane doses. He asked Creature to deliver them to Remus anonymously with a paper soaked in veritaserum saying it was real. Just because he wouldn't contact him doesn't mean he wanted the man to suffer his transformations. It must be hard without his best friends next to him. Harry scoffed at that. Wormtail was one of those so-called friends. Oh, how it felt familiar to him. He merely continued his day and went to bed, dreaming of his newfound time with his precious godfather. 2 weeks passed by as if it were 2 decades. Every day, his anticipation grew. By the last 3 days he could barely focus, constantly tripping on nothing and spilling his drinks. He could barely sleep, not that he really needed sleep, and he constantly muttered to himself, the time ticking by. Then the day came. He'd meet his godfather. More excited than his first day at Hogwarts, Harry put on some of his finest pureblood clothes, and changed to Loke in his late 20s. He flowed into the ministry as apparating through the wards would be suspicious, and he silently asked Death for directions before heading to the courtroom. The sight was heartbreaking. There he was, his godfather, covered in grime and dirt, his hair he took pride in during his youth, tangled and tousled. His face was ghostly pale and skeletal, and his eyes were dull with barely any life left. He was thrown roughly into the seat with chains on his wrists, and he barely contained his boiling anger as the ministry workers sneered in disgust at him. How dare they look at him that way? He thought in anger. We are here for the trial of one Sirius Orion Black, the crime, the murder of a dozen muggles along with Peter Pettigrew, of being a Death Eater, and the betrayal of the Potters to he who must not be named. We have seen Peter Pettigrew himself who turned himself in, proclaiming himself guilty and you to be innocent. This trial will now commence. You may administer the veritaserum. The minister stated. Harry took a breath as to not explode. When they violently grabbed his jaw and shoved the potion down his throat, clenching his fists, he continued to gaze at his godfather. Name? Sirius Orion Black. Blood status? Pureblood? The serum is effective. The women told the judges. Did you kill those muggles? No, this caused an outbreak of outrage. Were you the secret keeper? No, Peter was. Were you at any point a Death Eater? Never. By this proclamation, everyone was in complete shock. It was finally sinking in that they put an innocent man in Azkaban. Suspect is cleared of all charges and will be compensated for his time in Azkaban. The minister muttered out. Harry watched in relief as his godfather was released of his chains and escorted out of the courtroom. However, when he was about to head out the doors, he sprinted full speed and grabbed his godfather by the arm, shadowing them to Grimmauld Place. Who? Sirius yelled, clearly startled by his capture. Shish, Uncle Siri, it is me. Harry exclaimed with a hug. Harry returned his body to his child form and embraced his waist with a tight clutch. He could now feel the tears prickling his eyes. He had his godfather. He was real. Sirius let out a choked noise of shock. Wah, Harry. How are you supposed to be a baby? I wasn't in Azkaban that long. Who the hell are you? He exclaimed, incomplete distortion. There was no mistaking those looks, the slightly messy black hair and emerald eyes, though he looked a lot more sophisticated than his father. Harry looked at his godfather, whose eyes shone with confusion but also a whisper of hope. Harry gave him a small smile. It is me, Siri. I'll explain everything, but for now, you need to clean up. I've already asked Creature to prepare a meal and a bath for you. A set of clothes will be beside the sink. If you need anything, call me. Harry instructed him. Sirius looked like he wanted to argue, but realizing the state he was in, he decided to act now and ask questions later. He started heading upstairs for the bathroom. Harry let out a sigh and sat down at the table. It was around 9 in the morning, and he was too nervous to eat breakfast beforehand. He started on his French toast and eggs, and by the time Sirius approached he was finishing up his coffee. Sirius still looked sickly, but his skin was coloring in, and his hair was clean and brushed. Sirius looked at him in bewilderment as the supposed baby was drinking coffee and sitting with the epitome of pureblood manners. "I'm glad you are looking better, Padfoot," Harry said with a smile. He ushered him into the room and sat him down on a nutritional meal. Unlike him, Sirius hadn't had substantial food in ages. He requested Creature to give him a full meal. There was all kinds of steaks and sausages with delicious sauces, seared and roasted vegetables of all kinds, a bowl of mashed potatoes and gravy, and a bread bowl filled to the brim with beef stew. Next to it was a large jug of water and a bowl of exotic fruits. Sirius looked conflicted on eating or asking questions, but his rumbling stomach made him choose the prior. He stuffed the food into his mouth with a lack of manners, but who could blame him after spending months in prison? Harry simply sat at the other end with the newspaper and coffee. Every now and then he could feel Sirius gaze at him in curiosity and confusion, but he ignored it and continued reading. When Sirius finished, he gave a small cough for his attention. Harry looked up and saw he finished, so he waved his hand over the dishes, which were suddenly clean and flew into the cabinets. "Wah-ha-ha," Sirius brilliantly stated. Harry let out a small giggle. "So, where shall I start?" Harry asked him. Well, first, aren't you supposed to be one? Why in Merlin's name do you look like a child in above 5? He asked with a tone of crazy. "Oh, well, those are my metamorphagus abilities." Sirius choked on that. How had he even gotten that ability? "I can't very well look like a walking baby, so I made myself slightly older." "So you were one? Then how are you speaking, and oh Merlin, you were reading the Prophet and drinking coffee? Is this a hallucination? Am I insane now?" he shouted, standing out of his seat with his hands slamming into the table. "Okay, we have a lot to go over. Sit down, and please try to not interrupt." Sirius sat back down and nodded, then looked at him expectantly. "Okay, so, I am Harry James Potter, but I'm from the future." Sirius's jaw dropped at that. Harry gave him a moment to process before continuing. "When my parents were murdered, Voldemort was defeated when the curse deflected, proclaiming me the boy who lived. Dumbledore sent me to Mum's sister Petunia. There, I spent my next 10 years of life abused and neglected. I was forced to sleep in a cupboard and do all their chores. My cousin used to bully me and beat me up, and any time I did accidental magic I was punished. It was horrible." By this point Sirius looked outraged. Harry swallowed nervously and continued. "When I got my letter, my relatives tried to escape, but Hagrid ended up coming to help me." Harry gazed up with a small reminiscent smile. "I was sorted into Gryffindor, made some wonderful friends, and enjoyed my life for once. Though my years were hectic. First year, I rescued the Philosopher's Stone from Voldemort, who was hiding on the back of our defense teacher's head. Second year, I saved my best friend's sister from the Chamber of Secrets where a basilisk was. That was the year I discovered I was a parselmouth too. Third year was when I met you." He perked up at that, but his expression turned concerned when he saw my sad expression. "I wasn't aware of your innocence then. We all thought you were after me. You snuck in to capture Peter, who was my friend's rat. However, at the end Professor Lupin," Sirius's eyes looked like they would pop out, "discovered your innocence through the Marauder's map, and you ended up escaping with the help of a time turner. Fourth year, I was entered into the Triwizard Tournament, where I was forced to compete against those older than me. By the end, Voldemort stole my blood with Wormtails." Harry spat the name out. "Help. He was resurrected, and the Order of the Phoenix reunited. In fifth year, I had visions, and I was tricked into saving you." Harry's eyes started to water. "You fell through the veil, and I watched you die when I had only known you for 2 years. You were my only family left. It was all my fault. eye. Harry was cut off when Sirius shakily got up and hugged him. Harry desperately clung on to him, as if he was a lifeline. Harry sobbed a bit before continuing. After, Draco Malfoy, Lucius's kid, was ordered to kill Dumbledore. He didn't succeed, but Snape ended up doing it. Sirius looked outraged at that but didn't interrupt. Then, I went Horcrux hunting with my friends, and when it got to the final battle, I realized I was a Horcrux. He whispered that last part. He shut his eyes. I had to die, so I walked into the forest and allowed Voldemort to kill me, which he succeeded. By this time, Sirius had tears in his eyes. Letting out a shaky breath, I continued. I then met Death. Turns out, the tale of the three brothers was real. I had become the master of Death in coincidence. I was then told by Death about my friends. How they were using me for my fame and money. How Dumbledore knew all along and didn't genuinely care about me. I was then offered a choice. To try again. To live the way I deserved. Harry finished. He looked up at Sirius, who was crying with him. Harry wiped the tears with his finger with a small smile. I know this is hard to take in, but please believe me when I say it is true. I trust you and love you, Siri. I wanted you to know. When I came back, I spent my time learning and practicing everything I could, and I made sure to free you as soon as I could. I just wish it could have been sooner. Sirius smiled and embraced Harry again. Oh, pup. I believe you. There was too much truth to be a lie. You don't have to feel bad, you freed me, didn't you? And I promise I'll always be there for you. Dumbledore can fuck himself for all I care, and you will make new friends. Now, I'll spend the time with you that you deserved. Harry hugged him tighter after those words, before getting up and looking him in the eye. I'd like that, Pads. If you wouldn't mind, could you gain guardianship of me? Harry asked shyly. Sirius smiled and ruffled his hair, which Harry swatted his hand away with a chuckle. I'd love to, Harry, and why don't we stop by the ice cream parlor after Gringotts him? Sounds good. This was it. Harry thought as he and Sirius got ready. He was with Sirius. He was home. Chapter 4 TIMESKIP. The next few weeks flew by like the wind. Sirius supposedly went off the perimeter of the wizarding world. He never bothered to correct the rumors to avoid the spotlight. Dumbledore had sent him a dozen owls by now, but he ignored them. There was no way Sirius would be acquainted with the man who ruined his godson's life, and he was sure as hell still angry at him. Sirius spent his days bonding with his godson, and there was nothing else he'd rather spend his time on. Saying Sirius was baffled by Harry would be an understatement. He'd never seen a child, well, sort of, so mature, nor such a bookworm. He was worse than Remus and Lily combined. Sirius felt a pang in his heart at that thought. He remembered when the two of them would discuss books for hours on end, a memory that'd never occur again. He still felt guilty. He still blamed himself for the Potters' deaths, even with Harry reassuring him constantly that it wasn't his fault, that he couldn't have known. Yet, he was the one who asked for the switch, a decision he will regret for the rest of his life. Sirius's thoughts lingered on Remus for a moment. He realized Remus hadn't contacted him, even with his case being on headlines for weeks. He felt guilty that he assumed Remus was the traitor, but he couldn't bring himself to owe him an apology. Perhaps that is how he feels as well. His thoughts then drifted to another matter. Harry, in all the time he was with him, never mentioned Remus. That brought on some questions. What was their relationship? He decided to ask him. Sirius casted Tempest with his new wand. It wasn't the same as his old one, but what could he do? They snapped his old one. He realized it was dinner time. Sirius made his way up the creaky steps, still unadjusted to being back in this miserable, dull home, to find Harry. It wasn't hard, considering if Harry weren't in his room or the kitchen, he'd be in the library or potions lab. Sirius smiled at the sight before him. Harry was leaning against the fireplace wall with one hand floating a pile of books, his other practicing whatever he was reading. His eyes had a spark of ambition and his face held a slightly crazed look. That was something Sirius was proud of Harry for. He truly loved learning and growing. Suddenly, the air around him started swirling of glowing of pure magic. Harry's hair was flying from the magical breeze, and he watched in astonishment as 3 objects appeared in the magical whirlwind. The objects floated to the floor as the wind settled down, and in front of him was a cloak, stone, and wand. Sirius's breath hitched. The cloak was unmistakable, he had hidden under it many times. After all, that was James' prized possession. In his thoughts, he didn't notice the particular way it landed. The cloak neatly folded into a triangle, the wand penetrating the middle, and the stone in the center. The Deathly Hallows. Sirius gazed up at Harry when he finished reminiscing. His face practically glowed in pride and joy. Harry gazed up and noticed Sirius staring at him. "Siri, that was my first summoning with death magic. I can't believe it worked," Harry exclaimed ecstatically. "Ha! Good going, pup, that's my amazing and talented godson for you," Sirius grinned back. Harry tackled him into a hug which he happily returned, before letting go. "Anyways, it is dinner time, pup. Let's grab a bite to eat, yeah?" Sirius questioned. Harry nodded and happily skipped to dinner. A rare sight considering Harry rarely broke pureblood etiquette. Sirius followed, feeling pride for his godson. Harry had gone through so much, and yet here he was happy and powerful. He was excited to see what his skills would bring. They both sat down for dinner, happily enjoying some steak and spaghetti before Sirius decided to ask, "Hey Harry?" Harry hummed with a mouth full. "Well, forgive me for asking, but is there a reason you haven't contacted Mooney?" Harry froze mid-bite and put his fork down with a confusing expression on his face. Sirius took this as a bad sign. "It's not that I want to force you to or anything, it's just if you knew me. I thought you knew him, so I assumed." "No, it is fine, Siri. I get you are curious," Harry replied, though his voice had a tone of conflict. This confused Sirius further. It wasn't negative, more worry. "Did something happen?" he questioned. Harry quickly shook his head. "Oh no, I mean I knew him, and I guess we were close. He even taught me the Patronus charm in 3rd year." Sirius wasn't even surprised by his godson's crazy achievements anymore. "We talked and were close, he even told me stories of Dad. It's just, I don't know if I can trust him. I will." Harry took a breath. "I guess I felt betrayed in a way. In all the years before I met him, he never once tried to contact me. He didn't even try to file custody of me during my abuse. I mean, being a werewolf and all, I get him not being guardian, but he never once checked on me. All those years of abuse only to find out your father's close friend, practically an uncle, was alive and yet never there." Harry's voice started to lower. "If anything, it is because he is loyal to stupid Dumbledore. How can I trust him? What if he was in on it too?" Harry's voice started cracking. "What if he doesn't actually love me?" Sirius looked at Harry with despair. No wonder he never contacted him, he felt abandoned by him. "Oh, pup. I'm sure he loves you as I do. Maybe he felt guilty and so he didn't contact you. It sounds like a Mooney thing." Harry chuckled a bit at that. "Well, if you ever feel ready you should contact him. I'm sure knowing you, that you know his location?" Sirius questioned. I actually send him Wolfsbane monthly," Harry said sheepishly, rubbing his neck nervously. "Just because I haven't contacted him, doesn't mean I don't care." Sirius took this in and realized more than ever that Harry was kind. So unbelievably kind. "Hey Harry. How about we pay him a little visit? Why don't you ask him yourself?" Sirius suggested. Harry seemed to contemplate his words and gave a reluctant nod. "I'm just worried he won't accept me. I'm not exactly light anymore," Harry pointed out. "I'm sure he won't care about that. When should we go?" Now sounds good," Harry said, getting up and taking his arm. Sirius startled, but before he could say anything, he was sucked into the strange feeling of shadowing. Remus was currently in his small cottage. He knew he couldn't stay long as the landlord suspected he was a werewolf, thus ordering he leave. Remus sighed. This wasn't new anyways. He walked across the worn floor and closed his beaten-up case. Remus wasn't aware of the other two presences in the room, as shadowing could cover all senses. Sirius's heart broke a little at the state of Remus. He looked 20 years older than he was, his face was dull with bags under his eyes, and his hair was tangled and greasy. What had his best friend been doing? Why wasn't he there for him? Sirius, not being able to hold back, let go of Harry and leapt out of the shadows. Remus froze, eyes wide while holding his breath. That scent, it was unmistakable. There was no way he'd mistake one of his best friends. He spun around, but before he was able to comprehend anything, Sirius had wrapped his arms around him at rapid speed. Remus was frozen for a moment, before looking down at the shorter man and feeling his chest dampen from tears. His eyes started prickling as well, but nevertheless he hugged Sirius right back. Oh, how he missed him. They stood frozen like that for a while before Sirius pulled away, but before Remus could say anything, Sirius whacked him hard on the back of his head. Wow! Sirius, what was that for? Remus exclaimed, rubbing his now sore spot. Oh, how that brought back memories. It was the same spot Sirius always hit, no matter the reason. For not contacting me, you prat. You knew I was innocent and yet you didn't even try talking to me. Sirius practically screamed with tears rushing down his face. Remus's voice cracked. I'm sorry, I just felt so guilty. I thought it was you and just let you rot in Azkaban. I'm such a terrible friend and... Remus was cut off with another thwack to his head. Ow, stop that. Shut up, Moony. I thought it was you and felt like I had to apologize to you. Don't go blaming yourself on things you can't control. Haven't we taught you that? Sirius reprimanded. Remus nodded obediently. Sirius, satisfied, turned around as if expecting someone there. Oh, where for Merlin's sake? Harry, you can't just hide here forever, Sirius stated. Exasperatedly. Remus tensed at that. Harry? He couldn't mean. But his thoughts were interrupted when out of the dark corner popped a little boy who looked around 6 or 7. The boy had messy black hair with green eyes. But most importantly was his scent. Harry? Remus asked, shocked. Harry wasn't even 2 yet, but he smelled just like him. You can't fake scents for werewolves, so it had to be him. Harry shyly waved before looked down at his feet. Sirius rolled his eyes, grabbed Harry, and pushed him into Remus. Harry tensed at first before hesitantly hugging Remus. Remus instantly hugged back. Let's head home to explain, yeah? Sirius asked Harry. Harry didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed both their arms and they were shadowed back home. Remus immediately recognized this place. He'd been here a few times in his youth. He also decided not to question that bizarre version of apparition that was more comfortable yet chilling. Sirius ushered the two of them to the living room, before ordering Creature for some tea and biscuits. Harry just continued examining the floor, while Remus went through every scenario in his head he could think of. Nothing came close to the truth. After getting settled, Harry ran over what he told Sirius, not going to rewrite the entire thing again, but left out his insecurities. When he was done, Remus was gaping in complete bewilderment. Expecting this, Harry just munched on his biscuit while Sirius was laughing uncontrollably at his gaping face. Sirius, you believe this? Remus asked slowly through the laughter. Sirius calmed then shrugged. He gave me no reason not to, and living with him for the last weeks was clear proof. Sirius replied. Remus gave a small nod. Sirius glanced over to Harry and saw how tense he looked. Sirius decided to take it from here. Harry here had gotten me a trial by making Peter turn himself in. He told me everything after the trial. Harry. Sirius hesitated and glanced at Harry, who signaled him to continue. He and you had a more complicated relationship than me. He feared what you'd say or if you trusted Dumbles. He also was worried if you genuinely cared about him. Remus was shocked at that. His cub felt he didn't love him. That was horrible. He had failed his duty for his pack. Oh Harry, I'm so sorry. I asked Dumbledore, but he told me you were safe. If I had known I've taken you, I'm so sorry. I'll never believe Dumbledore again. Remus vowed. Harry gave him wide eyes, but eventually gave a small smile with glazed eyes. Taking the opportunity, Sirius pulled them both into an embrace. He was glad Sirius convinced him to contact Moony. Harry felt at home. This was what a family was. Maybe for once, he can truly enjoy his life with his wonderful family. Chapter 5. It went without saying that Remus would stay with them from then on. It was convenient for them all. Remus would have a place to live, Harry could bond with Remus, and Sirius could spend his time with his godson and best friend. The dynamic of the house was changed quite dramatically, with a daily dose of bickering, pranks, and witty remarks. The family grew close, as if they were together for years. Remus, like Sirius, had spent a while in shock every time Harry did something rather impossible, but he had eventually gotten used to it. Accepting his honorary godson defied all laws of nature. Currently, it was the first full moon day while living there. Remus was nervous. He hadn't received the wolfsbane from the anonymous source per usual. When he first received it, of course, he was skeptical, but after using it out of desperation, he realized it was legitimately wolfsbane, which truly was a miracle. Even when he moved locations a couple times, the potions always ended up on his dining table before breakfast. However, today that had not been the case. Was it the wards? Or did they decide to stop sending him? Did something happen? He was eating breakfast alone with his thoughts when he heard some footsteps. Judging by the weight, he knew it was Harry. Remus gazed up at the stairs and saw his godson fully dressed, and a box in his hand. Harry, who was not much of a morning person without his coffee, sleepily walked over, dropped the box in front of him, then went to eat his breakfast in his seat, which appeared with a pop. Curious, Remus gently opened the box only to nearly drop it in shock. Inside was a perfect batch of wolfsbane. The wheels started turning when it all clicked into place. Cub. Remus trailed off. Are you the one who? Remus was interrupted. Yes, it was me. I didn't want you to suffer through your transformations, so I figured I'd brew them for you. Harry replied nonchalantly, happily sipping his coffee. Harry just continued to eat as if this wasn't a huge deal for Remus. Remus felt warm, to realize his miracle angel was his godson this whole time, and that he cared enough to brew the difficult potion was heartwarming. He got up from his side and gently hugged Harry from behind. Thanks, Cub, he said sincerely. Harry leaned back and hummed his acknowledgement, enjoying the warmth of the wolf. They were interrupted by some not so discreet ahs. One thought popped into their heads. Sirius. Harry counted down in his head. 3, 2, 1. Ah, that was so heartwarming. You are such a softy, Moony. Sirius teased with batted eyelashes. Remus gave him an irritated glare before whacking Sirius, earning a yelp and glare. Yeah, as if you aren't a complete pile of mush when Harry so much as speaks, Remus witted back. Sirius started spouting out denial while Harry rolled his eyes, though still entertained by the situation. Harry swore that the two would never bore him with their bickering. They all eventually settled down to eat, though the occasional teasing didn't end. Timeskip. It was Harry's second, though technically 19th, birthday in 3 days. Sirius and Remus were currently planning what to do. They both realized Harry had never celebrated his birthday, not with those disgusting pieces of shit. They vowed to make this the best birthday they could. While they couldn't throw a party with other people, not wanting to raise suspicion, they knew Harry well. They knew how much he valued family, so they'd make sure to spend the entire day with him doing something together. They had everything planned, from the food to eat, the activities, to the countless gifts. They wanted to make up for every birthday he never got gifts for. Both were ecstatic, even more so than the unsuspecting Harry. On the day of his birthday, Harry barely even acknowledged it. He had long given up celebrating, and he assumed this year would be no different. He thought he'd get a quick, happy birthday, and a gift or two. He was pleasantly mistaken. Coming downstairs, he was startled to the loud, "Harry Pup, happy birthday!" that was shouted at the top of Sirius's lungs. Next thing he knew, Harry was picked up and spun in circles, thrown into the air, then tossed over to Remus, who flung him into his usual seat. That was an interesting way to start the morning, Harry mused. Scanning the table, he realized the foods were all his favorite. The fact they knew him so well warmed his heart. Harry gave them a bright grin before snatching a bunch of treacle tarts and chocolate frogs. "Thanks, Dads," Harry told them, before continuing to eat his tart. He suddenly halted, and his smile faltered. He didn't even realize he said that. What if they don't think of him as their son? What if they are offended? Will they be mad? Meanwhile, Sirius and Remus were both in shock but delight. He called them Dad. He viewed them as parental figures. Remus, being the practical one, snapped out of his thoughts when he noted Harry's inner panic. "Hey Harry, you can call us that. You are our son. I'm delighted that you'd call us that," Remus informed him. Sirius finally broke his trance and agreed with Remus. "Yeah, pup, we love you and you are ours. We're family after all." Harry's neck snapped up with eyes filled with shock, before his smile returned with a nodded. Breakfast went by smoothly, with Harry enjoying all the delicious treats. When Harry finished, he was about to head to the library when Sirius stopped him. "Oh no, you don't, Har. We aren't letting you spend your birthday in that dusty library. Let's head out," Sirius exclaimed. Harry turned around slowly and stared, as if checking for deception, before nodding and grabbing a pair of shoes. They all huddled together and Sirius apparated them to France. They all had a wonderful time sightseeing, trying new cuisine, taking pictures, and visiting museums. By the time they were all done, they all had a mad grin on their faces and tired feet. They all apparated back home to the living room, where Remus and Sirius showed Harry his present pile. Harry was shocked by the sheer amount of them. This was even more than Dudley's. When Harry asked, they said the number came close to 100. Opening them one by one had taken nearly 2 hours, but it was worth it. He had gotten rare books, some expensive potion ingredients much to Sirius's dismay, some cool gadgets with all kinds of charms from protection to enhanced speed, some enchanted jewelry, and some new clothing items. When Harry thought he was done, Moony and Padfoot handed him his last present. "This last one is a more special, Harry. We thought it was best to save it for last," Remus told him. Curious, he took the parcel that looked like a pile of books. He carefully unwrapped it, and the contents made his heart leap. There were 3 photo albums, one of him and his parents, another of the Marauders during Hogwarts, and the last one was of him, Moony, and Padfoot. Harry felt his eyes water at the sight, before he tenderly set them down on the wrapping paper and embracing his newly labeled fathers. "Thank you so much. For everything, for being my family, for accepting me," Harry whispered out. The 2 wizards held the young boy to their chest, just as grateful. "We should be thanking you, pup. You did so much more than you realize," Sirius responded. The 3 of them ended up spending some time looking over the albums. Sirius and Remus pointed out certain moments and telling the story behind them. Harry learned a lot about his parents that he didn't know in his last life. He realized he never had much time to talk with his fathers, and just how little he knew them. He was grateful he could get to know them now. Afterwards they all bid good night and headed to bed. Harry laid there that night with a content smile. This was the best birthday he had ever had. The next few weeks were spent reading his new books and trying out his new items. Harry started learning some more topics like alchemy, enchanting, and warding. He basically was a walking encyclopedia at this point, and he could do nearly all the spells he's learned. His relationship with his fathers were as strong as ever, and he spent most of his days getting to do what he enjoyed, with no one to judge him. No pressure of being the boy who lived. Next thing he knew, it was Hallows Eve. The day that changed his life forever. All 3 of them were subdued that day, knowing they lost people important to them. None of them were in any mood to joke or play. Sirius and Remus both thought it was a good idea to bring Harry to visit their grave. Harry instantly agreed. He had only been there once, and it was only during the Horcrux hunt. Harry had considered using the resurrection stone to speak to them, but decided he'd only use it when he truly needed to, as it was supposedly uncomfortable for spirits. The trio arrived in the graveyard and walked down the alleys to find the Potters. The air was chilled, and the small town was silent. The only sound was the crunching of leaves. The leaves were all falling, and the floor was shrouded in greens, oranges, and reds. They silently made their way to the correct grave. Harry could only stare down at them with clutched fists. This was where his parents are. He would never truly know them, and he didn't remember them. It was a painful moment to realize he didn't even know his own parents. Harry felt a teardrop, but he couldn't bring himself to care. Sirius and Remus were in a similar state. These were their closest friends, and yet here they were alive with their son, while they were dead. They all got out their wands. By the end, the grave was covered in flowers of all kinds and colors, but in the center was 2 red lilies. Harry decided to speak. "Hey Mum, Dad. I wonder, can you hear me right now? It is your son, Harry. I miss you. I love you. And I wish I got to know you." Harry started to sob. "Are you proud of me? Of what I've achieved?" Harry continued. "I hope you are, and I'll do anything I can to make sure I make you proud." Harry vowed. Sirius and Remus placed a reassuring hand on his shoulders. Sirius went next. "Hey Lils, Prongs, it is not the same without you guys. I miss you guys, and I wish I never told you to switch." He choked on the last word. "I promised to take care of Har for you, so don't worry about him." Sirius finished. He took a breath and stepped back. "Hey Lily, James, I miss you guys as well. I'm sorry I'm such a coward. I didn't contact Siri or Harry, but I will be better. I promise I'll care for Harry as my own, and I'll do anything I can to protect him." Remus promised. By the end all of them were teary-eyed. They stood in silence for a moment before deciding it was time to leave. When they arrived home they all just sat down and hugged. "This is family. My family," Harry realized as he snuggled between them. He was grateful to have them. They all fell asleep together on the couch that day, falling into a blissful sleep. Chapter 6 Prehogwarts. It has been around 9 years since the 3 reunited, yet it went by in a flash. In those years they were a happy family. Sirius had gained access to the Black Fortune, though Harry had taken the role as Lord along with the Potter Lordship, so he decided against getting a job, preferring to spend his time with Harry and Remus. Though Remus was hesitant at first, claiming he didn't want to be leeching of Sirius, he and Harry guilt-tripped him into staying, much to their smug satisfaction. Now, it was the day of Harry's 11th birthday. By now, Harry managed the miraculous feat of self-studying to Newt levels and nearly mastered death magic with Death's aid. Harry sleepily strolled downstairs, still tired as he stayed up reading. He saw his 2 dads seated unnaturally calm and staring expectantly at him. Realizing the date, he looked down and saw a familiar letter. His Hogwarts letter. Hastily, Harry snatched it with a shit-eating grin, ignoring his father's amusement. With an ecstatic expression, he ripped the letter open to see the identical list to the one he had from Hagrid. He thought back to the first time he received the letter, smiling at the feeling of nostalgia. He was so confused as to why anyone had sent him anything, addressed to his cupboard no less. And the moment Hagrid had knocked down the door, Hagrid saved him and was his first friend. Mid-thought, Harry suddenly froze. Now that he thought about it, why was it Hagrid who picked him up? He was Muggle-raised. He should have had a guide who was a teacher, at least according to Granger. He should have had a proper guide the first time his letter arrived. Was Hagrid in on it too? He felt his blood boil as things clicked into place. It was another plot from Dumbledore. Another attempt at manipulation. Sirius and Remus were starting to grow concerned as Harry froze in his thoughts, but he didn't notice. Dumbledore wanted him to meet Hagrid first, someone who was completely loyal to him. He knew Hagrid would make a good impression. Harry took a breath, trying to snap out of his self-rant, before sitting down, albeit a bit sulky. Sirius and Remus glanced at each other. They weren't sure what to say. They assumed Harry would be practically jumping with joy, which he was at first, but now he was glaring at the letter as if it offended him. They both nodded in subtle agreement that it was probably something from his past. They noticed certain tics like that. Any mention of Dumbledore would cause him to lash out, or certain topics seemed to set him off. They never questioned him about it, knowing he didn't like talking about it. Having enough of the tension, Sirius let out a subtle cough. Harry perked up and realized he was sulking again. He gave them a reassuring nod indicating he was okay, and they started eating. "So, Harry, excited for Hogwarts?" Remus asked lightly as he plopped some fruit into his mouth. "I guess so. It's nice to go back to my first home," Harry replied, "though I think I'll be extremely bored," he added as an afterthought, chewing on his breakfast. Sirius and Remus chuckled at that. They both knew it was no understatement based off the knowledge Harry has, not to mention his magical control. Technically 29 or not, he was a prodigy. They knew he'd be bored out of his mind, but he claims he wants to spend his Hogwarts years normally, when they asked. They wanted to snort at the implication of being normal though. Hearing Harry's life story, they are nearly convinced that he is both cursed and has Felix Felicis in his veins. Nevertheless, as much as they'd miss Harry, they knew this was something he wanted, so they were more than happy for him, even if it meant not seeing him for a couple months. "Why don't you and Sirius go today? Better get supplies now than later," Remus told them. Yesterday was the full moon, so Remus was too fatigued to join them. They nodded at that and finished up their breakfast. Harry knew people probably wouldn't recognize him with his scar hidden, but he was nervous going out. Of course, they had gone out many times, but always with charms or disguises to avoid any attention. Harry put on his finest pureblood robes. Looking in the mirror, he thought he looked good. His bangs framed his bright green eyes as his charmingly messy hair rested on his neck. He had a sharp jaw, pouty lips, and impeccable skin. He stopped using his metamorphagus abilities as soon as he grew to 6, and with proper meals and sunlight his appearance had changed dramatically from his first life. Something that satisfied him to no end. He was tall for his age and had a lean body. He had a tight gray button-up shirt tucked into his leather black trousers, a velvet green cloak that fell to his thigh, and dragon hide combat boots covered in silver buckles. His cloak held together from a snake clasp, there were silver chains draping across his belt, and he had his black snake ear cuff on. Satisfied, Harry made his way down from his room to Sirius. They said goodbye to Remus, then apparated. They decided to act as if they were nothing special. Let them approach first. When they first entered the alley, even without knowing his identity, people stared at his graceful demeanor. He paid them no mind, however, and stood with his head high next to Sirius. People also whispered at the sight of Sirius, as he hadn't appeared publicly in years. Ignoring them, Harry kept his proud posture and practically glided down the alley, Sirius by his side. People, of course, were curious of the young boy with calculating eyes, but no one had the guts to approach the seemingly intimidating pair. They headed first to get his wand. No need to gain suspicion using a wand from Nocturne. As Sirius and Harry entered the shop, Harry felt Ollivander's presence. He subtly smirked. His first life he was startled when the elderly wandmaker appeared seemingly out of nowhere. As if on cue, he appeared on his ladder like he remembers. "Ah, Mr. Potter, I was wondering when you'd show up." Harry quirked his lips in amusement. Even his first line was the same. Yes, my godson would like a wand, please," Sirius told him. Seemed Sirius wasn't in the mood for his antics. "Right, of course. How about we measure?" Harry interrupted him. "Actually, sir, I think I know which wand is mine," Harry informed him. Ollivander raised an eyebrow at this. Out of curiosity he questioned him. "Is that so? And where is that wand?" he asked the boy, though in a condescending way. Harry was slightly annoyed but still closed his eyes, and put his hand out. He was secretly excited to show off his powers a bit. He used to hate showing off, but his magic of part of him. He had a right to use it as he wished. He felt a magical tug, and to Ollivander's shock a wand box flew straight into his outstretched hand. With a smile, Harry took off the lid, waved the wand, and like last time he felt the warmth go down his body. Though it didn't feel as good as it used to. With his change in personality, the holly which was for the pure no longer had a strong pull towards him. Nevertheless, it was his wand through and through. Ollivander then continued on and on about the power of the wand. Voldemort and him having twin cores, blah blah blah. Harry was quite bewildered that it was word for word. They finally escaped the shop and they both sighed in relief. Neither of them liked Ollivander much with his nosy measuring tape. He and Sirius shared an amused look. Harry had already told him the story behind his wand. Continuing on, Harry being the person he is asked Sirius to wait for him in front of the pet store, to avoid interrupting the scene, as he liked to call it, headed to Madame Malkin's. Time to make friends with the one and only Draco Lucius Malfoy. While Harry still thought Malfoy was a prat, he realized by 6th year that he was just a boy who had no choice and was raised a certain way. He intended to change that. He would befriend him, and hopefully open his mind a little bit. He walked into the shop with a reminiscent feeling. This is where they first met. No rivalry, no hatred, just two kids going to Hogwarts. He remembered disliking him because of his similarities to Dudley, but he was just being silly. As if Ron was any better, he thought bitterly. Glancing around, he noticed Malkins heading towards him, and young Draco on the pedestal. Showtime. "Hello dear, are you looking for Hogwarts robes?" she asked sweetly to the boy. "Yes ma'am, I'd like 3 sets of Hogwarts robes with the highest quality material, and a couple of coats please," he told her politely. She had ushered him to the base near Draco, who was accessing him. Harry was confident it was a good impression. Draco had seen the boy enter the shop and was quite curious. As the heir to the Malfoy family, he knew all the purebloods and their status. However, this boy he had never seen before. He was clearly from a rich family based off his robes and his mannerism. How had he not known of him? Draco decided to spark a conversation as the mysterious boy waited next to him. "Hello, Hogwarts too?" Draco asked. The boy looked up at him and Draco felt his breath escape him. Piercing green eyes stared into his own with an intensity he'd think the boy was performing Legilimency. Up close, he could feel the sharp aura around his magic, and his posture screamed elegance. "Yes, I will be attending," Harry replied simply with a raised eyebrow. He knew of all etiquette by this point, and yet this heir of a fine house hadn't introduced himself first. Perhaps he overjudged him. Draco perhaps had never cared much for manners. "What house do you want to be in? I'm personally hoping for Slytherin. I can't stand the idea of being a Hufflepuff. Might as well head home from the train if that happened," Draco continued, with his nose stuck up in disgust. "Well, not the best way to start a conversation with someone you don't know," Harry mused, but he decided to go along with it. "I'm not sure. Probably Ravenclaw or Slytherin," Harry replied. He wasn't sure where he'd end up. He absolutely adored knowledge and any book he can get his hands on, but he was supposed to be in Slytherin last time, and he was ambitious when he wanted to be. "I hope you are in Slytherin. It is the best house after all," Draco proclaimed proudly. "How come?" Harry questioned. He was curious about his logic on this topic. "Gryffindors are idiots, Hufflepuffs are pushovers, and Ravenclaws are nerds. No offense," he added at the end sheepishly. Harry had his answer. Clearly, he was taught to believe that. "I see," Harry replied noncommittedly. He decided he had enough beating around the bush. "You know, you never introduced yourself," Harry pointed out. Draco's eyes widened momentarily, and a blush made his way on his pale face. He straightened up and gave a small bow. "I apologize," he started, remembering his manners. "My name is Draco Malfoy, heir of the most noble house of Malfoy. It is a pleasure to meet you," he said as he stuck his hand out. Harry gave him a bland smile and clasped his hand in a shake. "Pleasure, Heir Malfoy. I'm Harry. Harry Potter Black Peverell, Lord of the most noble houses of Potter, Black, and Peverell. He introduced with a small head tilt, indicating his higher status. Draco's jaw dropped and he undignifiedly gaped at him. This pureblood and mannered rich boy was the Harry Potter? And Lord of Three Houses? Harry raised an eyebrow before giving a small cough. When Draco snapped out of it and was about to say something, Malkins had returned. Here you go, dear. All ready to go, she said, handing him a couple bags. Harry gave a small nod of appreciation before taking the bags and heading to the door. It was nice meeting you, Heir Malfoy. I will see you at Hogwarts, and without a moment of hesitation, he was out the door, leaving a stunned Draco behind. Harry left sniggering slightly. That had been go. His face was priceless. Harry was absolutely telling Siri about that one. Harry spotted Sirius in front of the pet store, gave a small wave and headed over. Hey pup, got what you need? How did it go with the Malfoy boy? Sirius questioned. Harry chuckled, eyes filled with mirth. It was hilarious, I'll tell you later. Harry told him. They then headed in. Harry instantly walked over to the owls and searched the many cages for a peak of white. Harry saw owls of all kinds, colors, shapes, and sizes, but only one was in his mind. He was beginning to worry when he didn't see his owl, but calmed when he reached the end to see a familiar snowy owl. Harry's eyes softened a bit at the sight of his owl. He had missed her so much and was eternally grateful that she saved his life. Without a moment to spare, he stuck his hand inside the cage. Hedwig looked at his hand before nudging him softly and hooting in delight and desperation. He tilted his head in confusion. It was as if she recognized him. That's because she does. Death's ominous voice filled his head. Harry nearly jumped, startled. Sorry for scaring you, Master, but I thought you'd want her. Animal souls work differently from humans, so I was able to bring your owl's soul and place it back in time. Death informed him. Harry wanted to cry but refrained. Thank you, Death, that means a lot. Harry told him, feeling waves of gratitude. Anything for you, Master, was Death's reply, before his voice disappeared from his mind. Harry went back to reality and picked up her cage. However, as he headed to the cashier with Sirius on his heels, he stopped to a familiar language. There was a tone of hissing he'd recognize anytime. Parseltongue. Curious, Harry followed the sound. It was the reptile section. Tracing the sound, he was led to a small glass tank. Inside was a gorgeous obsidian colored snake. The snake was about a foot long with a skinny form. The snake was hissing out sadly. Dollar, oh please. Someone take me home. I can't stand this place, dollar NA. Dollar as Parseltongue the snake hissed to the people walking past, giving a snake version of puppy eyes. Not much difference of their usual expression. Unfortunately, snake hissing is viewed as rather horrifying and people immediately jumped away with frightened expressions. The snake seemed to realize this and curled into a small pile, sulking. Harry thought it was perfect. He walked straight up to the tank and looked towards the glass. Dollar, hey little one, would you like to come with me? Dollar, he asked the small snake. The snake whipped its head around and straightened out of its pile. Dollar, a speaker? Please take me. I hate this place, dollar, it asked desperately. Harry instantly agreed and stuck his free hand inside, the other one holding a slightly jealous Hedwig. The snake coiled itself around his wrist and sighed. Well, more of a hiss. Satisfied with the new warmth, Harry took his two pets to the register. Sirius, who had lost Harry when he ran off, was quite surprised to find a black snake coiled around his wrist. However, upon remembering he was a Parselmouth, he wasn't all that surprised. Harry had already purchased the books years ago during self-studying and he practically owned every book in the bookstore, so they headed home, seeing as he grew his own potion ingredients and had all the necessary cauldrons. Once home, Harry transfigured a tank with heating and expansion charms, then imitated a natural snake habitat. He then added some mice to hunt, and watched them scurry away. Harry then took the snake off his wrist and onto his palm. Dollar, so what gender are you, little one? Do you have a name? Dollar, Harry asked the snake. Dollar, I am male, and my name is Tenebris. Dollar, the snake replied. Dollar, okay Tenebris, this is your new home. Dollar, Harry said, setting the snake in the newly finished tank. Dollar, is this acceptable? Dollar, Harry questioned. Dollar, more than master. Thank you. Dollar, the snake exclaimed, before disappearing to explore his home. Harry smiled and turned around to settle Hedwig, who was gazing irritatedly at the snake tank. Harry shook his head fondly at the jealous expression and freed Hedwig of her cage. You don't have to worry, Hedwig. You will always be my special girl. Harry told her, stroking her beautiful snowy white feathers. Hedwig hooted in appreciation, leaning into the touch, glad to be back with her beloved owner. Harry smiled softly as Hedwig nipped his fingers playfully. Deciding today had been a long enough day, Harry put Hedwig on an owl stand rather than the stuffy cage he had been forced to put her in at the Dursleys. Satisfied, he climbed into bed and promptly fell asleep. He couldn't wait for Hogwarts. Chapter 7 TIMESKIP Harry woke up with more anticipation than ever in his 2 lives. It was today he'd be going home to Hogwarts. He jumped out of bed and sprinted down the stairs. He met Sirius and Remus downstairs, who were grinning at his excitement. The whole breakfast went by in a flash as Harry practically inhaled his food with hasty replies to small talk. As soon as his plate emptied, he ran back upstairs to get dressed. He put some of his best robes on and finished packing his trunk. Since Harry's trunk was also his wardrobe, potions stash, weapons box, and library, there wasn't much to pack. Glancing around his room, he strolled over to his nightstand where his last items lay. Gently, he picked up his 3 photo albums and put them in a secret compartment of his trunk. Next, he grabbed Tenebris and had him wrap around his wrist while ushering Hedwig into her cage. With everything packed and ready, he bolted downstairs. He saw Sirius and Remus waiting for him, arms out with a smile. Grinning, he held both their hands before they apparated to King's Cross. Harry felt a sense of déjà vu being here. This King's Cross, however, wasn't blindly white and sparkly clean, rather filled to the brim with people chatting animatedly. He and his fathers located platforms 9 and 10, which was relatively easy. They ran through the wall and Harry was faced with the gorgeous scarlet red and black train he saw so many times. He looked at his fathers, who were giving him a smile, though a bit sad. Harry gave them a big hug. Thank you, Siri, Remy. I love you guys, he told them into their chests. Oh, we love you too, pup. We'll miss you at home, Remus replied. You better write or I'm sending you a howler, Sirius informed him, which Harry hastily nodded to. I will. Bye, dads. See you over the holidays, Harry yelled over his shoulder as he grabbed his stuff and ran to the train. With one last look at his family, he smiled and went inside. He headed to the different compartment, hoping to avoid Weasley. Putting his stuff up on the rack, he sat down by the window and cracked open a book on rare potion ingredients. He was enjoying his reading when a certain Ronald Weasley entered his compartment. He internally sighed, there goes his wish. Can I sit here? Everywhere else is full, he asked nervously. Harry's eye twitched but nevertheless nodded, not wanting to cause a scene. While Ron sat down with an expectant expression, Harry was in deep thought. Everywhere else is full. He said that last time and I'm in a different compartment, he thought. He then gave a small sigh. Dumbledore again, I suppose. He has always got to be in my personal life, doesn't he? He mused to himself. I'm Ron, by the way. Ron Weasley, Ron informed him. Harry honestly wanted to strangle him. He didn't care if he worked with Dumbledore or not. He would never like Ron for using him the way he did. Harry, he replied coldly and went back to his book. Ron seemed startled by his cold response, but nevertheless pressed to continue the conversation. Harry, mate, so what are you reading? Ron asked. Harry gritted his teeth, already annoyed by the term of endearment. Potions. was his short reply. What? Potions is stupid. Why do you want to read that crap? It is boring. Ron whined, before realizing his mistake. Harry gave him a dark look, not wanting to deal with this shit longer. He grabbed his things and stormed out of the compartment, Ron yelling for him to come back. Not in the mood, Harry headed to the back of the train and found an EMPTY compartment that Ron claimed there were none of. He sat down with a sigh and continued his book in silence. At least he was, until another annoyance came in. Granger. N.A. Ron is referred to as Ron because there are a lot of Weasleys. Have you seen a toad? A boy named Neville lost one, she asked in a borderline condescending tone. Harry was getting more irritated by the minute. Why won't they just leave him alone? No, I haven't, he curtly replied before reading again. Hopefully, she'd take the hint. Oh, I haven't seen that book. Potions is an interesting subject. Of course I read all about it. In fact, hearing the know-it-all voice, Harry interrupted. Not interested, please let me read in peace. Hermione seemed extremely offended at this. That is rude, you know. You should be learning some manners, she stated with a stuck-up voice. Harry looked at her in bewilderment. Me rude? You came into my apartment without knocking, didn't even have the courtesy to introduce yourself. Then started rambling on and bragging because you have eyes that can read a book. If you want to talk about rude, look in a mirror. Harry retorted at her. Hermione's eyes filled with tears before she ran out of the compartment, but Harry didn't care. She betrayed him. Who cares what she thinks or feels? She held his studying back with that rambling. Sometimes he suspects she held him back in order to get superior grades. Harry knew his heart grew colder, but it was justified in his eyes. Harry sighed and finally returned to his book. After a couple minutes he heard a knock on the door. Curious, Harry opened the door to see Draco Malfoy. Heir Malfoy, he acknowledged. Malfoy bowed, secretly relieved. He had been looking frantically for him for a while now. Lord Potter Black Peverell. May I sit with you? Draco asked formally, though there was a touch of nervousness. Be my guest, Harry told him, thankful that he doesn't have to deal with anyone more annoying. Draco sat down in the compartment, not before noticing the tome he was reading. Do you enjoy potions? Draco asked. Potions is enjoyable, though I prefer the dark arts. Draco's eyes widened comically at that. Dark arts? The Harry Potter enjoys dark arts? He exclaimed. Harry just smirked and went back to his text, which he was almost finished with. Draco, deciding to be respectful, took out his own book and they both laid in the compartment, secretly enjoying each other's silent company. While reading, Harry started thinking up a plan with Snape. He knew getting Snape to open up was like brewing a potion. One step wrong equals an explosion with injury. He knew he had to word things carefully. Harry knew the only way to have Snape listen was through his mother, so that's where he'll start. Thinking up a plan, he remembered something. Tell me, Potter, what would you get with an infusion of asphodel and wormwood? Rang through his head. Having a little knowledge on the Victorian flower language, he took a moment and dissected the meaning. I bitterly regret Lily's death, he dawned on. Well, that changed everything. To think Snape had knowledge on the Victorian flower language, though nearly him snicker. On a more serious note, he realized just how much his mother meant to Snape from the memories. His hatred towards him, while not justified, was understandable, him being the son of his love and his bully. This was a good start, and an advantage. The rest of the train ride had run smoothly without annoyances, and he and Draco did small-sum talk. Harry decided that befriending Draco was quite easy, given his status. As they exited the train, they passed a rather sulky Ron and a tear-stained Granger. Harry knew he should feel remorse, but he couldn't feel a thing for the traitors. Rather, he had a subtle quirk of his lips before walking past. He watched as all the first years gaped at the castle. He, on the other hand, stared with sad eyes. He watched Hogwarts stormed by Death Eaters and watched them torture students. He hoped that wouldn't happen this time around. Harry was still contemplating on the subject of Voldemort. He knew what he was capable of and had the power to destroy him, but on the other hand he'd never allow Dumbledore to win. Perhaps he would go with the flow and see for himself. He knew the Horcruxes had destroyed Tom Riddle's mind, so maybe he could restore it, if he had the right goals anyways. Harry shook out of his thoughts when they were at the entrance hall. He listened to McGonagall's speech for the second time. Rather than paying attention, he scanned the room. Obviously, he wouldn't be befriending Ron or Granger. Seamus had betrayed him over the Proft, he barely even knew Dean, but Neville he was okay with. He also made a note to slip Padfoot or Moony in front of the twins. Walking forward, they headed to the Great Hall and waited for names. Of course, he already knew where everyone was being sorted. Scanning the staff table, he noticed both Dumbledore, Snape, and Quirrell looking his way. Dumbledore and his twinkling eyes made him want to stupefy him to the next life. Perhaps he'd tell Death to do so later. Snape had his famous sneer that made students pee themselves. No surprises there. And Quirrell was staring at him rather blankly. He wondered if it was Voldemort or Quirrell currently. Deciding to be suicidal, he looked towards Quirrell, raised an eyebrow, then winked at him before looking away as if nothing happened. He caught Quirrell's shocked expression before he went blank. Harry decided if he was immortal, why not be suicidal a bit? He had to bite his lip from laughing. Anyways, his name was called. This will be good, Harry thought. He didn't know if he was a Slytherin or Ravenclaw, so this would be interesting. Harry gracefully walked towards the seat and sat down in a swift motion, ignoring the Harry Potter? No way, it's him, he's so hot. No way. He's obviously a Gryffindor. Harry rolled his eyes at that one. Pretty sure it was Ron who said that. He felt the hat placed on his head. Well, seems like I've already sorted you. I see you met Death. And you seem to have upgraded. Now, where to put you? Harry decided to stay silent this time around. A thirst for knowledge and a clever mind. You'd do wonderful in Ravenclaw. But you are cunning, planning out the future. You hold secrets and are driven for your goals. Ah, yes, that would be right. Slytherin. The hat yelled out. NAI considered Ravenclaw, but for Tomary to occur it'd be convenient for Harry to be in Slytherin. Harry smirked. Seems like he would always be a snake at heart. No one clapped. Except a smug Draco, who in suit caused other Slytherins to clap too. At the moment Draco held the most power in the house. For now. He took off the hat and handed it to the frozen McGonagall, who didn't get the golden boy. As she thought. He didn't care, he had his own agenda. He glided over to the Slytherin table with a smug expression and sat down next to Malfoy, who gave a bow of his head. That already drew the attention of those around them. A bow of the head indicated higher status. Seems there was more to Harry Potter than they thought. After McGonagall recovered from shock, the sorting continued. Harry glanced at Snape, who looked as if he swallowed a lemon, Dumbledore staring at him as if he was his living nightmare, and Quirrell who stared in curiosity and hidden glee. As soon as the sorting finished the food appeared, shocking the first years. Harry, who showed no reaction, merely filled his plate, causing others to follow in suit. He felt all eyes were on him, but he was used to that. Harry decided it'd be convenient to get his status out now. Avoid the trouble later. Since you all are actively staring at me, I'll introduce myself, he drawled. Some people looked away flustered at that. Harry Potter Black Peverell, Lord to the most noble houses of Potter, Black, and Peverell. I do hope for your sakes we get along, he informed them with a smirk, before continuing his meal. He watched in amusement as all the house members' eyes widened in shock before they all hastily introduced themselves as heirs to different families. Based off their eager introductions, he knew he shouldn't have a problem in this house, not when he had more power than their parents combined. So, Harry, if I can call you that, Draco started. He received a nod before he continued. Where have you been the last few years? Well, Draco, Dumbledore with his brilliant mind decided he wanted their savior to grow up with muggles, Harry informed them, which listeners all gained an outraged expression. That was a total disgrace to the wizarding world. However, With my godfather Sirius Black being rendered innocent at his trials a few months later, Sirius thought it prudent to adopt me, along with my dad's other friend, Remus Lupin. Seemingly satisfied with his answer, the subjects moved on to other small talk, before they headed down to the dungeons led by the prefects. As they walked, Harry decided this will be a fun year. His first order of business was Snape, the twins and Neville, then Voldemort. Harry just hoped Dumbles wouldn't do anything to stop him. If he did, he'd have more hell to pay than already. Chapter 8. Harry was currently with Draco in the dungeons when Professor Snape entered. Harry had to bite back a nostalgic smile when he came in with his black robes billowing behind him. While Harry was by no means friends with the man, his death impacted him greatly. He had protected him for the years he's been here, even if their interactions were anything but pleasant. "You all have been sorted into Slytherin for a reason," Snape started. "You are resourceful, cunning, and ambitious. Cunning as you are, I want no trouble to follow our house." Snape stared at Harry on that one, who simply stared blankly back. Snape looked away and continued, "Do not disappoint the Slytherin house with your idiocy. I expect you all to thrive, no exceptions. If you are to break rules, do it discreetly. Now, on to bed." He snarled the last part. The scared first years scrambled out except for Harry and Draco, who stayed beside Harry. Draco was curious why he stayed behind. "What do you want, Potter?" Snape sneered. Wow, he really hated his existence. They hadn't even talked yet. Harry blatantly ignored his tone. "I need head of house permission for unlisted pets. I have a familiar." Snape raised an eyebrow at that. He had expected some royal command for having his own room for his fame. Though still, it could be some ridiculous request of like a Thunderbird knowing great Harry Potter. "And what familiar would that be?" Snape drawled, though he was clearly hiding curiosity. True familiars were rare in the wizarding world. Harry efficiently rolled his sleeve up to show his obsidian black snake curled around him. "This is Tenebris. He is poisonous, but I can control him," Harry told him. At the unimpressed and wary stare, Harry rolled his eyes. Tenebris, he doesn't believe me. Can you give him a nod or something?" Harry requested. Tenebris slithered in front of the potion's master and nodded. More like bobbed his head. Harry physically restrained himself from bursting out laughing as Snape lost all color and his eyes nearly popped out, clearly recognizing the language of snakes. "As you can see, I can control him. Does that suffice?" Harry questioned, acting nonchalant. Snape gave a pained nod, so Harry slipped into his room with Draco trailing behind. Apparently, the dorms were by two. Not surprising considering the majority here are purebloods. Luckily, he shares with Draco. He assumed it was Death's doing. The room in front of him was luxurious with wide walls with high ceilings. The floor had a rich green carpet and the beds had silky silver sheets in the black frame. There were intricate nightstands which had snake engravings in them, and brilliant chandelier with shimmering crystals. The whole room was spotless, unlike the Gryffindor's worn rustic room. Honestly, why hadn't he agreed to be in Slytherin? They even get their own bathrooms. That face, it was hilarious. Draco gushed out when they settled down. Harry just smiled and bid him good night. He decided to leave everything in his trunk rather than unpacking, though he set up Hedwig and Tenebris's cages first. Afterwards, he changed into his sleepwear and headed to bed, but not before warding his possessions and sending a letter to his parents. "Dear Moony and Padfoot, I ended up in Slytherin. No surprises there. Everyone was shocked. You should have seen Dumbledore's face. He looked like he got hit with a crucio. I doubt I'll have issues in the Slytherin house. After all, I hold more power than their parents. Voldemort is here with Quirrell like last time. Have a plan, so don't worry." Snape was his normal snarky self. He freaked out when he heard me speak Parseltongue. "I think this year will be interesting. I'll miss you guys. Love, Harry." He handed it to Hedwig before heading to his new bed. He definitely expected a howler in the morning. Harry woke up early that morning. He casted a tempest wandlessly to see it was 5 a.m. He took a shower, got dressed, and then headed outside the castle for his run. Before he left, he was stopped by a furious Snape. "And what are you doing this early in the morning?" Snape snarled, fuming. He assumed he was out of bed for some prank. The nerve of Potter to get in trouble on the first day. Just like his father. "Good morning, Professor," Harry greeted. He honestly expected this. "I was heading out for a run. I usually run laps every morning, and the Hogwarts rules say that curfew ends at 5. It is 5:15, so may I go out?" he asked calmly. Snape sneered. "And you expect me to believe that?" he challenged. Harry just sighed. "If you are so worried you could come out with me," Harry told him. "But you cannot keep me from going out if I haven't done anything. Now if you'll excuse me." Harry then proceeded to walk past him. Snape was fuming even more and decided to follow, disillusioned, wanting to catch him in the act. While he knew this was excess, he wouldn't let him disgrace his house. Harry withheld a sigh as he practically stalking him. Too bad he wouldn't see anything. Harry proceeded to walk down the halls and to the Quidditch pitch, where he spent the next half-hour running laps. He was a bit bemused that Snape was still there. Wasn't he wasting his time watching him uselessly? He then walked off to the sides of the field and did some exercises. He noticed Snape leaving after hitting his 100th push-up. He ignored him and continued to crunches. Snape, on the other hand, was surprised. Potter was actually exercising. That wasn't behavior he expected from the pampered golden boy. Still, he reluctantly left, finally convinced he wasn't doing anything. He then realized he wasted an hour watching the brat. He scowled and went to breakfast. Harry finished and took a shower before heading into the Great Hall. It was quite early in the morning, so barely anyone was here. He took a seat alone at the table before looking at the food. He grimaced. It was all sugary. Children's foods. Deciding he refused to eat the crap, he mentally asked for a house elf from the kitchens. Something Death told him was Hogwarts would help those who were worthy. A small house elf popped in front of him with wide and eager eyes. "Did Hogwarts student want something?" the small elf asked eagerly. "Could I have some more nutritional foods? Some bread with fruits and vegetables," he told the young elf. The house elf eagerly nodded, and in front of him was his meal. Harry sighed in relief in having a healthy diet, and begun eating. He noticed the curious gazes of some of the staff for his food choices. They probably expected him to pig out on all that junk. However, he always did eat a treacle tart. Snape had started handing out timetables and gave Harry one with a distasteful expression. Harry merely thanked him and scanned it. Transfiguration. Draco had then joined him, grumbling about early mornings and such. He exchanged pleasant greetings with his housemates, who seemed to polish his shoes now knowing his status. Even those who gazed in envy backed off. Thank Death for the Peverell lordship. Dinner was almost over when Hedwig came in with a red envelope. The people around him warily scooted away, but Harry calmly transfigured some earplugs, shocking the staff at his abilities, and opened it. "Harry James Potter." The voice echoed through the room. A familiar voice to some of the staff. "I'm so proud of you being in Slytherin. My little snake has grown up. You better cause a little bit of trouble in our legacy. Oh, but. You were always my little baby. Remember. Sirius, why on earth would you send a howler? I'm confiscating the staff froze hearing the name Sirius. Could that mean? Oh, shush Remy, he won't care, now anyways. Another wave of shock at the mention of Remus Lupin. I don't care if he cares, give it. I'm not a damn dog, you. The voice was interrupted by incoherent screeching, thuds, crashes, and shouting. Harry just raised an eyebrow, bored. Everyone was watching wide-eyed now. I'm sorry, Harry. Congratulations though. Can't wait to see you after break. Remember, we love you, son. The letter then ripped into pieces in front of them. Harry just sighed, casted a spell to banish the scraps, then went back to eating noncommittedly. Everyone in the hall was frozen. Dumbledore was shocked. Harry was supposed to be at the Dursleys. How had he not been there? The protection wouldn't exist anymore. McGonagall was also surprised. This pleasant and mannered young man, from what she could tell, was raised by two of the Marauders. What miracle was this? Snape looked sour. He was raised by those bullies. Harry ignored all the stares and finished his food before grabbing his bags and leaving on his own. Draco seemed to want to follow, but he was busy speaking with his other friends. Harry made his way to the library to read a couple books before he noticed the time and walked to Transfiguration. He saw McGonagall on the desk and winked at the cat before choosing a seat. The cat's eyes widened a moment before going back to expressionless. Draco later walked in and sat next to him. I wonder where McGonagall is. Surely she wouldn't leave students unsupervised, Draco wondered aloud. Harry smirked, pointed at the cat before going back to his reading. Draco looked at him as if he lost his mind. Like last time, everyone arrived, though Granger seemed rather upset. He arrived first, everyone except Ron. 3.2.1. The doors burst open and Ron came bursting in and stumbling into his seat. Granger, who seemed annoyed, spoke out. You are late. You need to come to class on time if you want, she started in her annoying voice. Don't tell me what to do. McGonagall isn't even here, Ron interrupted. McGonagall took the opportunity to transform then. Ron gaped at her. That was bloody brilliant, he exclaimed. Harry had to hold in a chuckle as she made the same pocket-watch comeback. Not being on the receiving end, it was quite funny. Like last time, they were changing a match to a needle. Harry, already knowing magic, asked McGonagall over. Yes, Mr. Potter? She asked him. I can already do this. Could I do something else? He questioned. A ring of snickers ran around the room. Clearly people thought he was just egotistic. Is that so? McGonagall replied condescendingly. Well, if you can do it, why don't you show me what you can do? She requested, clearly trying to put him in his place. Harry was annoyed. He hated people underestimating him. She clearly forgot about the earplugs. He took his wand out and silently changed his match into a gorgeous needle. It was obsidian rather than silver and had a snake coiled around it, each scale perfectly engraved. The eye of the snake was made of emerald and the body had strips of silver in it. He calmly handed McGonagall the needle. To say she was shocked, speechless, was an understatement. She looked ready to pass out. In all her years of teaching, she had never seen such a perfect and advanced transfiguration. Even she doubted she could have made such a pattern on first try. Escaping her stupor, she gazed at him with curiosity, not noticing the bitter-looking Hermione. 20 points to Slytherin for a perfect transfiguration. Seeing as you were obviously advanced, would you mind demonstrating to the class how far you've gotten? She asked him. Harry nodded. He took out his wand and decided to make a spectacle. He flourished his wand around the room lazily. For a moment nothing happened, but suddenly the room fell into pandemonium. Papers were changed into butterflies, quills into birds, and the desks changed into dogs. Since inanimate to animate transfiguration was the most difficult, he thought it showed off his skill well. Harry smiled as everyone in class glazed in awe at the animals before he swept his wand around and they all turned back. Everyone stared at him impressed, but one Granger had to ruin it. Professor, he clearly cheated. He is a first year, he couldn't do that, and he said no words, so he wasn't using official incantations. He did it all wrong. The snob stated, standing up from her seat. She had expected McGonagall to agree with her and reprimand him. No one was better than her. But she was horrified when McGonagall glared at her affronted. How dare you, Miss Granger? Mr. Potter here just completed Transfiguration of Newt level. Just because he didn't use the official textbook doesn't mean he cheated or did it wrong. There are many ways to complete magic. The incantation and movement is just for the wizard or witch's benefit. 5 points from Gryffindor for false accusations. McGonagall scolded her. Harry felt extremely smug as she seated down with her head down and tears in her eyes. Serves her right. McGonagall turned to him. That was quite an accomplishment, Mr. Potter. Your father would be immensely proud. Harry saw her eyes soften as he gave her a small smile. I can see if I can get you into an upper class, or you can self-study with some of my guidance. I'd prefer to stay in this class. I can also help out other kids if you require it. I'd like that, Mr. Potter. How about we start now? Harry spent the rest of the time helping other kids on their matchstick. By the end, most students had made some sort of progress. Harry discreetly avoided helping Ron and Hermione, who both frustratingly couldn't do anything. The thing about Hermione is her practice. Work wasn't wonderful. Once class was over, McGonagall thanked him before they were ushered to the next class. Charms. He was unbelievably bored in charms. They didn't even cast any magic. He looked at his schedule to see the next class. Potions then. Defense. This'll be interesting. Chapter 9. Harry was currently seated in the dungeons, fully expecting Snape to make a dramatic entrance. He was not disappointed as Snape slammed the dungeon doors open and glided to the front. He did roll call, but not before the Potter, our newest celebrity, nonsense. Harry knew despite wearing green, Snape would still try to embarrass him, just without taking points. You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making. As there is little foolish wand waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. Harry decided to tune it out, seeing as he remembered the entire speech. Oh, how he remembered. He was so excited for potions that day. He after all loved chemistry, so he assumed potions was the same. But Snape had embarrassed him and taunted him when he was just writing down the captivating speech. That day ruined potions for him for the entirety of his Hogwarts years. Between Slytherins sabotaging his potions and his low self-esteem, Harry ended up doing badly. Granger may have believed he was using Snape's old potions book, but he already knew all those tricks and was able to apply them without Snape on his neck. That didn't mean he learned to enjoy it, however. It was only with Death's encouragement he got into potions again. He owed Death so much, his thoughts were suddenly halted. Potter. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? He challenged him. Though Harry now knew the true meaning behind those words. The draught of living death, sir, Harry responded. Snape glared at him a bit. Lucky guess. Where would you look if I requested a bezoar? Snape asked again. By this point, Harry noticed Draco glaring at Snape for threatening him. Harry felt his heart warm that Draco already cared so much about him. Draco was nothing like he used to think. The stomach of a goat, sir, Harry again responded. Snape just sneered and continued the lesson. The rest of the time went the same as last time. Neville failed spectacularly like last time, and Weasley did terribly. Granger pridefully handed Snape her potion. Snape picked it up with distaste. This is average at best. The color is too light, and the consistency is off. Guess you aren't as talented as the other professors say. Shame really, Snape tutted at her before heading back to his desk. Granger looked ready to cry again. Harry could care less, however, and raised his hand as he finished his potion. He changed up the recipe a bit for more potency. The instructions on the board were actually inaccurate, and he knew better than to follow it word to word like Granger. Snape headed over and looked at him in distaste. Snape snatched the vial from him and examined. Harry saw Snape's eyes widen. The potion was perfect. Snape could barely believe his eyes. The potion was perfect color, and the perfect thickness. It even had a shine that showed extra potency. Snape's first thought was he cheated, but he had watched him the entire time. He saw him add different ingredients than the board. He assumed he'd fail, and he'd delightfully give him a 0. Turns out he had devised his own recipe. Snape didn't even care that it was Potter at the moment. This potion is perfectly crafted. Well done. 10 points to Slytherin, Snape complimented. Only a few seconds later did he realize this was Potter. He immediately looked physically pained, which Harry thought was hysterical. Snape really didn't like him. The rest of the class wrapped up. Most potions banished and many 0s given. Even to some Slytherins. As everyone packed their things, Harry stayed behind. Draco looked at him. but Harry just glanced at the door telling him to leave. Draco obeyed. "What do you want, Potter?" Snape sneered once again. "Thank you. I know she would have forgiven you," Harry told him. Snape's eyes widened in shock. He hadn't expected Potter to know the true meaning. "I have no idea what you are talking about," though Snape's panicked eyes told otherwise. "Yes, you do. I know you knew Mum, and that you were friends. There are pictures of you in a photo album I was given, and the note indicates she cared a lot about you. She'd forgive you," Harry responded. Snape looked at him with pained eyes, and blurted out before he could stop himself. "No, she wouldn't. I was horrible to her." Snape looked so broken in that moment. Harry heavily swallowed. He reluctantly handed him a ripped and retaped photo. A letter note was on the back of a photo with tear stains. He didn't think Siri or Remy knew about the short note on the back of a photo in his photo album. But as hurt as he was to give away the photo, a bit of his mother he had left, he knew he must. Not before making a copy for himself, however, as it was a beautiful photo. "No, she would have. Anyways, thank you, sir. I must go. See you tomorrow." And with that, Harry left, leaving a shocked Snape behind. Snape looked down at the photo Potter left behind. His hand shakily picked it up. It was a picture of Lily and him asleep under a tree while holding hands. They looked about 12 in the photo. Numbly, he turned it around. "Dear Sev, I know we haven't talked in a while. I was just so hurt you called me a mudblood. But I understand the crowd you hung out with expects it. I won't say I'm not upset about it, but I get it. I hope we can be friends again. I'll try my best to get James to back off, I promise. I miss you lots. I hope we can talk again. Yours, Lily." For a moment Snape wondered why she never sent it when it suddenly hit him. This was written before she found out he was a Death Eater. That would explain the tears and the ripped pieces. She must have found out and found it the last straw. He felt so stupid. He had joined the Dark Lord for what? Servitude, pain, loneliness. He lost his Lily, his only friend and love, in the process. She was going to make up with him. Snape didn't notice as tears filled his eyes and slid down his cheeks, too wrapped up in his thoughts. When was the last time he felt these emotions? So sad. Not since Lily's death, he supposed. Snape stared at the photo for a bit longer before tenderly lifting it and conjuring it a frame. He set it down on his day. Snape sighed and wiped his cheeks. Here he was acting like some heartbroken schoolgirl. But this wasn't just any crush, it was his Lily. Snape later realized he'd have to thank Poe no Harry for this. He suddenly felt terrible. Harry had been nothing but polite to him and simply endured all his remarks and taunting. He even knew who he was, that he was responsible for him being an orphan. Knowing Black probably informed him. But what would he say to him? Snape would have to ponder on that. Harry was walking down the hall, hoping Snape would change as he planned. He arrived to defense just on time and took a seat with Draco, who was looking at him curiously. Quirrell started the lesson explaining the curriculum with his blubbering and stuttering. Honestly, how had he not known it was fake the first time around? The inconsistency of it should have been a dead giveaway. He had started tuning out the lesson when he felt his scar tingle. But it didn't sting like it used to. It felt warm, ticklish. He looked up to see the turban facing his direction as Quirrell wrote some spells on the board. So Voldy was looking at him, he could have sworn he felt the curiosity through his scar. Harry merely gave the turban a look indicating he was caught before pretending nothing happened. The scar suddenly jolted, but not painfully, more like a poke, before the tingling faded. Harry felt mildly disappointed. The feeling was nice. He wondered why. He started paying attention again when Quirrell instructed them to stand in 2 rows to practice Expelliarmus. This didn't happen last time, Harry thought. Though he didn't really mind, he figured Voldemort wanted to test his skill because he knew who he was. Harry could live with that. Harry merely walked into line with his wand at the ready. Oh goody, I'm with the know-it-all, Harry thought with a sarcastic tone. The girl in question was glaring at him with clenched fists and a nasty scowl, clearly hating him for the previous instances. He was delighted to add to the streak. Quirrell instructed the opposite group to go first. He watched as Granger attempted for his wand, failing each time. Harry merely stood there waiting for her to succeed. It took her about 5 tries, still better than the rest of the class who were confusedly waving wands around. When the wand fell out of his hand, she gazed at him smug and gave a condescending smile. It only added to Harry's already furious fuel. Deciding to steal her thunder, Harry lifted his hand and to her shock the wand flew back to its owner. Harry just stood there waiting for the others while Granger looked even more pissed, especially when she wasn't awarded any points. Then it was his turn. Harry felt his scar tingle again. Assuming Voldemort decided to watch, Harry lazily pointed his wand, not bothering with the movement or incantation, and watched the wand zoom out of her hand and using his seeker skills snatched the flying wand midair. Her face fell and looked redder than a tomato. Harry just threw the wand back to her and waited, not disappointed when Granger exploded yet again. She really couldn't handle being second best, could she? Professor Potter cheated. He didn't say the spell or do the movement. He couldn't have done that, she babbled, clearly forgetting McGonagall's words. Boy, was that the wrong move. Harry watched as Quirrell's eyes flashed red with a fuming expression. Looks like Voldy took over. Ms. Granger. I do not tolerate tattletales in this class. Nor do I tolerate false accusations. Just because Mr. Potter did better than you does not mean he cheated. 10 points from Gryffindor. Quirrell, Voldemort snarled at her. She yet again looked ready to cry. Seriously, was she always such a crybaby? She was getting on his nerves more than ever. Quirrell, Voldemort then turned to him. Wonderful display, Mr. Potter. I expect great work from you. 10 points to Slytherin. Harry was taken aback by the sincerity of his tone. Harry just got complimented by Voldemort. For whatever reason. Harry felt immensely joyful by the comment. Perhaps he would work just a bit harder to aid Voldemort. He liked this nicer version of him, not the angry psychopathic one. Harry smiled brightly with a nod before gazing at the rest of the class. Everyone was staring at him awestruck. He supposed that would happen a lot. He hadn't even shown his wandless magic yet. Once people snapped out of their awe, they continued attempting the spell. By the end only half the class were able to succeed. None as well as Harry of course. The class ended and everyone headed out the door, but not before Harry paused at the exit. I know who you are, and I'm here to inform you that I have no plans on stopping you. He then walked out the door before hearing a response. Draco was at the door waiting. What was that about? Draco questioned curiously. Something you'll learn by the end of the year, Harry vaguely responded. They then headed to the last class as Draco puzzled over his words. Flying class. Harry had flown around back home with his fathers, still loving Quidditch just as much as he used to. It was one of the few things that stayed the same. Though Harry wasn't sure about getting on the team this year, he had other plans to carry out. Harry looked down at the brooms handed out in distaste. The school has the money to set up the Triwizard Tournament yet couldn't buy some new brooms? These were safety hazards. Madam Hooch came with the usual instruction and told them to call the broom. Obviously, Harry got it first try, broom firmly in hand. Ringing of up passed through all the first years as they struggled. Harry had no shame with sniggering at Ron when he smacked himself, his face matching his hair as everyone snickered. The git deserved that. Harry vaguely wondered what would happen this time around. Draco most likely wouldn't be a git after all. His question was answered soon as Neville flew into the air and like last time started falling. For whatever reason, Harry decided it would be a good idea to alter the timeline this time and help Neville. Knowing how to fly this time, Harry instinctively hopped on his broom and zoomed towards Neville, ignoring Hooch's screeching for him to stop. He made his way full speed, hair flying all directions and his robes blowing in the wind. With his agile skills, he flew directly under Neville and caught him within his arms. Neville, who was screaming his lungs out, seemed to realize he wasn't falling to his death and opened his eyes. The last person Neville expected to see was a Slytherin no less Harry Potter. With widened eyes, Neville clung tightly to his savior before Harry landed to the floor. He pulled Neville from behind him onto his feet. "You okay, Longbottom?" Harry questioned, genuinely concerned. He did care about Neville after all. "Why yeah, thanks," Neville stuttered with red ears. Harry gave him a relieved smile. He then looked around and realized he dropped his. Remember, like last time. He did a silent accio with his wand and handed it to him. "I believe this is yours?" Harry asked him, his arm outstretched. Neville hastily took it. "Thank you." Neville's voice was full of awe and gratefulness. Harry then vowed to make Neville more confident. Last time he grew to be a strong, brave man. Maybe he could speed up the process. Their conversation was interrupted with Hooch. In all my years of never. Please tell me you knew how to fly." Harry thought if he should lie or not, but decided against it. They all knew he stayed with Remus and Sirius now. "Yes ma'am, I've flown many times. I knew what I was doing." "Well, 10 points to Slytherin for saving another student. Now let's continue the lesson without incident this time." Harry watched as kids tried flying for the first time, some zooming a few feet off the air, others tripping over their broom. It was nice reliving this. Harry and Draco ended up chasing each other a bit. Once class was over, they headed back into the castle after a long day. Harry had a lot of fun today. He wondered what the future would bring with the stone. He hoped he could save Voldemort this time. His thoughts lingered on Voldemort a tad too long than normal, before he drifted to sleep. N.A. Tomary is coming soon. Chapter 10. Harry woke that morning quite confused and disgruntled. He had a strange dream last night. He was in the realm of death, aiding death with souls, when a strange entity halted him. A strange misty shadow glided in front of him, blocking his path. The shadowy figure expanded, taking a blurry human shape. The figure wrapped its shadowy arms around him, pulling him into an embrace. Harry just froze there. It felt strangely familiar, warm, gentle, sweet. The figure leaned into him and whispered a possessive, "mine," before fading back into the dark of the realm. Harry's eyes widened and he frantically looked around, trying to relocate the strange figure. He was stumped when it was nowhere to be seen. Harry stood there for a few moments. Was that Voldemort? Harry wondered. It would make sense. He was the only one who would think of him as theirs. Harry sprinted over to Death to confirm. "Death. That shadowy figure. Was it Voldemort?" he quickly asked, out of breath. "It seems so, Master," was Death's neutral reply. Harry dumbly nodded. Harry snapped out of his recollection and climbed out of bed. He wasn't stopped by Snape this time, though he stared blankly at him as he passed. Harry ran a lap or 10 too many as his brain scanned the events of his dream. How had he known? Why was he in the realm of death? Should he say something to Quirrell, Voldy? He decided against it. He had to think this through. Voldy was on Quirrell's head, the rest of the Horcruxes haven't been touched, so it had to be the one in him. Perhaps it followed him too. Death realm because it was part of him. It dawned on him that his Horcrux probably could separate as a different entity in Death's realm. But why? Now, was it because Voldemort was there? Harry, who was panting at this point, realized he ran a lot longer than he anticipated. He hastily took a shower and sprinted to breakfast. He and Draco exchanged greetings and they were eating until the newspaper appeared. Harry peeked at the headline. It was news about the Philosopher's Stone like last time. "Merlin, I can't believe someone attempted to rob Gringotts," Draco exclaimed. Pansy joined in. "I know, right? Who in their right minds would think that's a good idea?" Harry nearly snorted. That was right, they weren't in their right mind. "But they didn't take anything. I wonder what they were after," Blaise pondered. While Crabbe and Goyle stuffed their face with sugary sweets, Harry wondered when he should steal the stone for Voldemort. He scanned the staff table. Quirrell had a blank expression, and the rest had worry etched into their face. Except for Dumbles. He felt his stare and that bastard twinkle without a glance. Harry so wanted to Avada his ass. He kept his expression void of emotions before joining back in the Slytherin conversation. Those so-called obstacles were nothing but child's play. He would get the stone easily. He just needed to wait for the mirror to be moved, but he already had the cloak. Harry realized what a stupid idea it was to give an 11-year-old an invisibility cloak. He wanted him to find the mirror, that arsehole. Harry thought about it a little longer. Perhaps he could work with death a bit more so he wouldn't need the cloak. Deciding on it, Harry finished his breakfast before heading to classes alongside his new friends. TIMESKIP October 31st, a day he despised with passion. It had many definitions, but to him it was his parents' demise, the day he was orphaned, the day filled with one monstrosity after another every year. He walked down the hall with disgust at all the pumpkinheads, bats, and candy. The first time he didn't understand why the purebloods had a problem with Halloween decor, but he knew better. Here were the Muggleborns changing and practically ridiculing at their culture. Harry walked to the table silently, not in the mood to talk. The air around him was so cold the Slytherins felt nervous. It felt as if the air froze over around him. "What's wrong, Harry? Shouldn't you be celebrating today?" Pansy asked, concerned. She didn't realize what today meant for him. Harry glared with blazing eyes at her. No one even cared today was his parents' deaths. No, they didn't even remember their sacrifice. He stood up abruptly, not caring about food, and sped to the head table. He gave Snape a slip in which he signed before he stomped out of the hall. "Did I say something wrong?" Pansy asked, confused. Draco glared at them as students shrugged their shoulders. How did they not realize? "Did something wrong? Tell me, what happened all those years ago today?" "Pansy," Draco snarled at her. Pansy looked affronted. "The Dark Lord was defeated, of course," Pansy replied. "You idiot, Pansy. Harry lost both his parents today," Draco yelled. He watched satisfied as Pansy and all the other students turned pale and looked away in shame. They were so insensitive. "I need to apologize, don't I?" Pansy whispered. Draco nodded and they all ate breakfast, albeit a bit subdued. Harry was in his rooms waiting for Snape. He was being escorted to Godric's Hollow per his request. The troll could kill Granger and Weasley for all he cared. Today was for his parents. Snape eventually made his way to the dungeons, where he escorted Harry to the headmaster's office. Harry was reluctant to go in there but knew that he couldn't apparate without raising suspicion, so he conceded. They were about to flow when Dumbles decided to come and ruin things even more. "Where do you think you are going?" Dumbledore inquired, trying to sound calm but clearly wasn't. "I have head of house permission to visit my parents' graves. Surely you wouldn't stop an orphan from seeing his deceased parents on their death day?" Harry asked, voice void of all emotions. Harry observed that Dumbledore looked nervous, probably because he knew about the troll. He wanted him to fight it, that pathetic coot. Now, my boy. You should visit some other time. Today you should feel support of your friends." Harry furiously cut him off. "If you dare tell me not to visit my parents, I'll tell the Daily Prophet you stopped the orphaned Harry Potter from visiting his parents on their death day." "Now if you don't mind," Harry interrupted before aggressively snatching some flow. "Wait. At least return for the feast." Harry didn't let him finish as he fled out of there. Snape was staring at the whole scene with fury. What was Albus's problem? Stopping Harry from visiting poor Lily. That man has lost his marbles. Snape glared at the headmaster before silently leaving, not even bothering with dramatics. Dumbledore sat at his desk worried. He knew the troll would be released and he needed Harry to help Hermione so they'd be friends. He noticed they didn't get along, but he could still hope. Dumbledore sighed. Perhaps Ron could save her. It should be fine. Dumbles thought about some other ways to make them friends. Harry fled home to Sirius and Remus. They weren't aware Harry was coming. They assumed he'd stay at the castle because of Dumbledore. They were delighted to see him until they saw the anxiety and grief written on his face. "Harry, we missed you. I'm guessing you were here to visit Godric's Hollow." Remus inquired as he and Sirius pulled the slightly distraught boy in a hug. Yeah, and Dumbles tried to stop me, Harry sneered. Both parents growled at that. The meddling coot, what right did he have stopping Harry? How about we head there now? Sirius suggested. Harry nodded and they all apparated in front of the graves. Harry immediately knelt in front of the grave, his school cloak draping on the floor. Sirius and Remus glanced at the boy who sat there, head hung, and hands held together. They were worried. He was always depressed on Halloweens and they always visited, but he currently looked so defeated. Mum, Dad, Harry started. I miss you. I'm a Slytherin, Dad. I hope you wouldn't be disappointed. I made friends with the kids of Death Eaters. I'm sorry. Harry choked out with tears falling down his face. Sirius and Remus looked at each other, now understanding. He was worried his parents wouldn't approve. He, after all, was trying to revive their killer and was a Slytherin, friends with next-generation Death Eaters. Me and Snape get along now. Sorry, Dad. I know you'd want a Gryffindor child. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you wanted. I'm sorry that I want to revive Voldemort. Harry finished. He sobbed for a while. The adults made silent prayers of their own. When Harry calmed down, he took his secret wand out and put some lilies on the grave. He then stood up, still looking down. Sirius then hesitantly suggested something. Hey Har, I think this is a good time to use that stone thingy you had, Sirius awkwardly stated. Harry glanced at him. He looked down at the grave again. Should he? Was it a good idea? Harry didn't want to see his parents staring at him with disappointment for what he became. He just couldn't bear it. But on the other hand, he knew he should. He had to make peace with it. Harry gave a small sigh and nodded. He put his hand out and requested the stone. He watched as black whirlwinds of death magic swirled in his palm until the small stone was floating above his palm. He braced himself and grabbed it. Sirius and Remus walked away to a nearby bench, wanting to give Harry some space. Harry opened his eyes and looked down at their feet. There standing were the shadowy figures of his parents. He greeted them quietly. Mum, Dad, he mumbled weakly. He didn't want to see their disappointment. He knew was coming. Harry, his mom said gently. He looked up hesitantly into her eyes. His own widened when he saw they were filled with love and care, not disappointment. He glanced at his father who had the same look. Harry, you could never disappoint us, never, Lily stated firmly. Harry once again looked at his father. She's right, Harry, we love you no matter what, his father reassured. Harry looked down again. Even if I'm a Slytherin and reviving the Dark Lord? He asked a bit fearfully. There was a long pause and Harry closed his eyes waiting for their response. You have your reasons and we've seen what Dumbledore has done. It's okay, James replied. Lily nodded in agreement. Harry gave them both a small grateful smile, his eyes glazed and full of love. I love you, Harry told them before giving them a hug. Both his parents were surprised until they realized Harry was master of death so he could physically touch them. They hugged their little boy back. Holding their son again was something they never thought would happen. We love you too, sweetheart. Tell Remus and Sirius we are grateful to them for taking you in, Lily told him. Harry nodded and embraced them for a little longer before dropping the stone. Harry sighed. While he could visit the realm of death, both his parents had already moved on. The only way to speak with them was through the stone. He looked down at the small jewel. It held so much power for such a plain design. He used death magic to send it away again, watching as the swirls disintegrated it. He walked towards his fathers and hugged both before signaling them silently that he wanted to leave. They nodded and apparated back into their home. Harry decided to share his meal with them rather than the feast, completely aware that this could get Hermione dead, not that he cared. Once he finished his meal after some catching up, he walked over to the flow, bid goodbyes then left. He arrived in the headmaster's office which was empty and simply headed to the dungeons. By now, everyone would be in bed and the troll defeated. He walked into his room to see the horrified looks of Slytherins, along with fearful murmurs. What happened? Harry inquired, Acting confused, Draco glanced up and quickly responded. A troll escaped into the castle. It injured Granger and Weasley. They're both in the St. Mungo's. Draco looked pale as he stated this. Harry feigned shock before heading to bed. Before he did, he was stopped by Pansy. I'm sorry, Harry, I was insensitive. I hope you can forgive me, she apologized sincerely. Harry nodded to her before leaving to bed. He felt off as he stared at the ceiling. He didn't feel any remorse for letting them get hurt. He wants to revive Voldemort, the man who killed and hurt so many. Was he a bad person? Those were the thoughts that haunted him before he drifted to sleep. Chapter 11 TIMESKIP. It was currently time for the winter holidays. This also meant he'd receive his cloak, see his father's, and soon execute his plan with the stone. Harry had painstakingly waited for this, suffering through lectures he practically memorized and the irritating Gryffindors babbling. Draco and he became brothers in all but blood. His popularity in Slytherin house rivaled none, and Snape was a lot warmer to him. It was time to go through the hardest part of the holidays. Gift shopping. Harry decided to send Kreacher a list. Rather than sneaking about, though Kreacher still hated him, he considered releasing the elf but decided he had his uses. He took out a piece of parchment and pondered on what to buy everyone. Crabbe and Goyle would want food obviously, Pansy would enjoy makeup, and Blaise would probably enjoy a book. He decided to give Sirius and Remus a two-way mirror like the one Sirius once gave him. That way they could communicate on a regular basis. Now for Draco. He wanted to give him a special gift. Draco was quite different from the first time. He was humble, polite, and treated others well. However, he still loved the quality things in life. Harry thinks he did rather good, turning Draco into a proper pureblood rather than a spoiled brat. He settled on a protective piece of jewelry. He decided to get a gift for Snape too. He had found some parcel journals by Salazar Slytherin in a shop earlier that year. He would translate it and give it to him, seeing as many of them were forgotten potion recipes. He considered getting Tom a gift but decided against it to not raise suspicion. And so, that's how Kreacher sent 2 giant boxes of exquisite chocolate, a deluxe everlasting makeup set, a limited edition book set on rare spells and potions, 2 perfectly sculpted mirrors, and a gorgeous necklace. The mirrors were specially made, having a floral carved gold rim with fire rubies encrusted, specially made for Gryffindors. The necklace he self-designed for Draco had a silver chain with a pendant of 2 snakes intertwined holding an emerald which had runes carved in. The runes warned a person of danger and all control or compulsion magic were ineffective. The necklace was by far the most expensive thing yet, costing 450 galleons. He decided to wrap all the gifts in green velvet with silver ribbon, courtesy of the Prince of Slytherin. He ordered Kreacher to deliver them on Yule Day and proceeded to plan for Voldemort. Harry knew that even with the stone, there was a high chance he'd return without sanity, especially with so many Horcruxes. He also knew that Voldemort would never comply to the whim of Harry Potter. So, what was his solution? Kidnap Voldy, knock him out, and throw him into his own ritual, of course. Harry along with Death's helped design a ritual. The planning took a couple hours, dozens of papers, many versions of plans, and a lot of effort. The problem with soul magic was the act of splitting one's soul has dire consequences, placed by magic herself. Normally, these effects were irreversible, however, Harry had death magic and access to many resources. The plan was to knock Voldemort out using a death magic spell. It essentially put a person into a preserved state, no heartbeat or breathing but still alive. He'd sneak in using shadowing and take him to Grimmauld Place, which happens to have a ritual chamber. Once there, he'd perform the ritual that he'd pre-set up. The ritual wasn't complex, but required immense power and purest of intentions. One false move could botch up the entire outcome. Anything with soul and death magic used together was like walking on a tightrope. He just hoped it would work. TIMESKIP. Harry was currently on the platform with his Slytherin friends to greet his parents. With his shrunken luggage, Hedwig heading home on her own and tenebris around his wrist. He hurried over to his father's and hugged them both tightly. Harry could feel the onlookers staring, but he couldn't care less. "Dads! I missed you," he exclaimed, beaming brightly. Sirius and Remus smiled at him. Sirius ruffled his hair. "Missed you too, pup. How's it going?" Sirius asked, laughing as Harry huffed and fixed his hair. The three of them bickered a bit when Draco made it over with his father and mother. Harry felt his father's tense a bit, but Harry ignored them and faced the incoming family. "Harry, this is my family, father, mother, this is Harry Potter Black Peverell," Draco introduced, not noticing the tension with a bright smile. Harry grinned at his friend before kneeling and kissing Narcissa's hand, then offering a hand to Lucius. "Pleasure to meet you, Lord Malfoy," as Draco said. "I'm Harry Potter Black Peverell, Lord of the most noble and ancient houses of Potter, Black and Peverell." Harry introduced himself. Lucius shook his hand firmly, eyes shining with curiosity and condescending. The latter irritated him. He would so have fun with him later, without harm, as he cared about Draco. "Likewise, Lord Potter Black Peverell. I must say, Draco's letters quite surprised me, not only with boy who lived in Slytherin but being friends with them and being the lord of 3 houses." Lucius then gazed at his fathers as if they were below him. "Black, Lupin," he greeted coldly. They both stiffly nodded back. "Yep." Harry was more irritated, but he wouldn't let it show. "You'll find I'm nothing like the press claims," Harry chuckled out, diffusing the tension. "And I'm sure we'll be meeting more often," Harry informed him. Harry looked over to Draco. "Have a good holiday, Draco," he told him with a genuine smile. Draco grinned and nodded back. Harry walked past the family with his fathers in tow, but not before having a little fun. "Oh, and Lord Malfoy, your master will be calling soon, just a bit of warning. I do hope you are still loyal." And using his Horcrux, which he figured out still registered as the Dark Lord, he sent a jolt at the dark mark. He nearly laughed as Lucius turned pale and stiffly nodded, hand subtly clutching his arm. Harry then grabbed onto his fathers and they apparated. Once there, they all burst into laughter. "Oh Merlin, did you see Malfoy's face? It was priceless," gushed Sirius once they settled. "Yeah, he looked paler than his already pale skin," Harry chuckled out. "So, Harry, you're going to be resurrecting him soon, right?" Remus questioned. Harry nodded. "Yeah, I'm planning to on Yule Eve. Seeing as I can shadow into the castle, it shouldn't be a problem," Harry told them. Remus nodded thoughtfully. "Hey pup, will we be housing him?" Sirius asked, curious. Harry sheepishly nodded. "Only for the break, then I'm planning on bringing him to live in the Chamber of Secrets," Harry said. Sirius nodded. After that was settled, Harry started unpacking in his room and going to the ritual room. He entered the dark, empty space. Ritual rooms were always bare to avoid accidents. This one was no different. The room was dim with bare gray walls. On the floor were circles pre-drawn for use, and a set of cauldrons and rune tools in a cabinet. Not wasting time, he grabbed some powder from the cabinet and spread it across the inner and outer circles. In the middle of the circle, he placed a small golden bowl. The bowl had runes carved into it, its use only for blood. He then drew an outline for a body, for dear old Quirrell, and 2 circles for the locket Horcrux and the stone. He hand drew some runes on the outside, each carefully drawn in. It took a solid hour to get all the rune sequences written, surrounding the outer circle. Next to the bowl, he set down 2 vials. One was Phoenix Ash, the other was Liquid Dementor Soul, courtesy of Death. He went through the drawers and placed a small ritual dagger in the middle as well. The dagger was simple, being completely silver with a blood-red tip. Finally, he casted a stasis charm over the entire ritual area and got up. Once that was settled, he left the room, leaving the door closed. Yule's Eve was in 3 days. Harry could feel the anticipation climb up his skin. He couldn't wait. Harry noted that he was a bit overly excited to meet the man who killed his parents, but he couldn't help it. Harry planned on grabbing the stone early in the morning, then capturing Quirrell right after. The plan seemed simple enough, so he wasn't worried. Harry couldn't wait to see Lucius's face when he is summoned. That'll be priceless. Harry just hoped that sane Voldemort would get along with his dads, otherwise there was truly a problem on their hands. Chapter 12. Harry's mind had been focusing solely on Voldemort, literally. He had been tripping on his own feet from all the what-ifs of the rituals going through his head. His mind was forced to rearrange rather quick when he received an invitation to the Malfoy ball. Glancing at the invitation, he knew this was a big deal, if based off the solid gold intricately engraved card. Harry had no doubt that Draco begged his father mercilessly to give such a prestigious invitation to a filthy half-blood, even if that half-blood was none other than the boy who lived. That, in a way, made it worse, as most upper classes were Death Eaters who despised him for defeating their master. Despite this, Harry knew this was a perfect opportunity to meet allies and perhaps befriend Death Eaters before Voldemort's return. He of course accepted, and that was that. The day before Yule he'll be frolicking with pureblood folk. Harry knew this was an opening to the political world within the ministry, so he put on the finest robes he owned. A rich dark blue velvet robe with a silk black tucked dress shirt, each button being a silver coiled snake. He had black matte leather trousers and dragonhide ankle boots. He wore a leather belt with 2 silver chains hanging off each side. His hair was styled so his bangs swayed to the side, and he had his snake ear cuff in. Thinking his appearance was acceptable, he bid goodbyes to his parents, who were iffy about him going, and apparated to Malfoy Manor. He apparated directly at the entrance to the shock of the Malfoys. He looked on with appreciation. The manor screamed money. With its tall frame, elegant gate, and beautiful architectural design, he certainly understood the appeal. Lucius, on the other hand, was pale. How had this boy his son's age apparated? Narcissa, however, was delighted. Her dragon made such a powerful friend, filling her with pride. Glancing at Lucius, who was still speechless, quite a rare sight that she enjoyed, she took the lead. Lord Potter Black Peverell, it is a pleasure to welcome you into our home, Narcissa politely greeted with a courtesy. Harry took her hand and placed a kiss. A pleasure to be here, Lady Malfoy. If I may be so bold, you too may call me Harry. My last name is after all quite long. Harry responded. Narcissa inclined her head. Soon enough Lucius woke up from his shock. Yes, Harry. I'm sure to expect. Lucius was interrupted to his great annoyance. Harry. You're here, how are you? I haven't seen now and forever. I'm so glad you're here. Draco speeded out while tackling Harry quite inelegantly into a hug. Harry chuckled and hugged back. Harry looked at Draco's appearance with satisfaction. Gone was the snobby brat who always wore too much hair gel. Instead stood a strong young man ready for whatever life threw at him. He was wearing glistening pale blue robes with his hair slightly gelled rather than the stiff mess it once was. Harry would never regret befriending Draco. He wished he had the first time. Slow down, Dre. I could barely hear you. I'm good and I miss you too. Harry laughed out, unwinding his arms. Draco smiled brightly. He missed his friend so much. He was surprised he could convince his dad to invite him so easily, but he wasn't complaining. That smile faded as he noticed his parents giving him a disapproving look, and he looked down sheepishly. Sorry Mum, Dad. I was excited to see Har again, Draco apologized, rubbing his neck nervously. We could see that, Lucius drawled with a raised eyebrow. Lucius knew they were close, but not that close. He had never seen Draco so open to anyone, not even to the Zabini or Parkinson heirs. If the Dark Lord were truly returning, Draco would be in trouble with this type of friendship with the Golden Boy. Still, perhaps that wouldn't be the case, seeing as Harry seemed to know about the Dark Lord's whereabouts. He decided early on since meeting him that he was not an enemy you want, sensing the strong aura around the young man. The way he presented himself showed confidence, a posture screaming superiority. He was also the boy who lived, portrayed as a hero, lord of 3 families, and a magical prodigy based off his apparating stunt. So, he tried to gain favor, agreeing with Draco rather quickly when he requested Harry to be invited to the ball. But even he had his limits, and inviting a blood traitor and lowly werewolf to the Malfoy ball would be a disgrace. He'd rather not sink down to those lowlifes. "I hope you enjoy the ball, Harry," he settled on, and with that, he headed back inside, Harry following with a chattering Draco. Lucius slightly shook his head. How had his proud and slightly pompous son become best friends with Harry Potter of all people? Entering, Harry admired the gorgeous hall with high ceilings and a shimmery tile floor. There was a golden chandelier hanging from the ceiling, raindrop-shaped crystals hanging off it. The tiles they walked on had a beautiful marbled flowery pattern, and the food tables were glass with a pure pearl white and gold trim cloth draped over. The walls had paintings of all kinds, no doubt valuable. Guests were soon filing in, and he watched as the hall filled up to the brim with elites and high ministry officials. He and Draco spent quite a bit of time catching up in a corner, despite sending letters over break, and Harry helped himself to the wonderful delicacies available. Enjoying the honey chamomile tea with some deluxe treacle tarts. He'll never get over treacle tarts. Harry vaguely wondered where all the other kids his age were. Draco, having read his mind, answered, "The heirs of pureblood families aren't able to attend until they are 14, where they come only for parents to set up marriage contracts. You and I are an exception, me obviously being a Malfoy, and you because you are a lord, the boy who lived, and a special guest," Draco informed him quickly. Harry nodded. "Well, I'm quite lucky, aren't I?" Harry said with a cheeky grin. Before Draco could respond, Minister Fudge had spotted Harry and made his way over, no doubt wanting a piece of the boy who lived. "Ah, Harry Potter. Wonderful to see you here," Fudge gushed out, excited to show his status with the boy who lived. Harry inclined his head politely. "Minister, pleasure to meet you." "And it is actually Harry Potter Black Peverell," he corrected, shaking the bony hands of the frozen minister. The minister couldn't believe it. This boy right here held more political power than his own officials. He could already imagine all the endorsement he'd get from a lord of 3 houses and the boy who lived. Harry, who could tell what he was thinking without even using legilimency, withheld a sneer. He knew that he wanted to use him for his power, something he fully expected. Well, he'd just have you use him right back. "Ah yes, my bad, Harry. So how is Hogwarts?" the minister inquired, not bothering with mannerism. Harry smirked this time. This was too easy. Lack of mannerism meant friendship and/or alliance. "Quite well, Minister. I am a fan of your work," Harry started. The minister looked at him with hungry eyes. "I plan to enter the political world quite soon. Despite my age, I believe I'm fully capable of voting and laws. I'd be happy to endorse you for your next campaign," Harry continued. The look in the minister's eyes looked as if he was given all of Gringotts' money. "Bingo. Is that so, Harry? Well, I cannot deny such a generous request. I'll be sure to be in contact," Fudge replied joyously. Harry had to try hard to bite back a smirk. He already had the ministry in his palms with a few polite words. Dumbledore wouldn't know what hit him. They continued with light conversation on political standings. Harry, who used this as an opportunity for information, learned that most voters were dark, a great advantage for Voldemort when he came back. The minister introduced him to some high officials, much to Harry's delight. A couple of flattering words and compliments and they were all over him. This was unchallenging to him, but he was a Slytherin after all. Lucius was watching the exchange subtly from the sidelines. He concluded his assessments were correct. The boy already had the minister in his pocket along with high officials rivaling his own power. There seemed to be more to the eye than Harry Potter Black Peverell shows. Soon after the ball ended, Harry bid goodbye to the Malfoys again, giving a long hug to a disappointed Draco and disapparated. Once home, he changed out of his robes and laid in bed. It was tomorrow. He absolutely couldn't wait. I nearly ended the chapter here but realized how cruel that was, so this will be a long chapter. Timeskip. It was today. 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 Repeated in his mind the second he was awake. He casted a wandless tempest to see it was 5 in the morning. Perfect time to steal a valuable and highly secure, magical artifact in his biased opinion. Without a second thought he threw on ritual robes, plain gray robes of high quality, and grabbed his untraced wand. He thought for a second about waking his dads and eating breakfast, but those flew out of his mind as soon as he left the door. Why go through all that when he could start resurrecting the Dark Lord now? His dads both knew how anxious he was for this, so they weren't expecting him at breakfast anyways. And so, Harry shadowed into the school. Luckily for him, no wards could prevent shadowing, not that he couldn't apparate through Hogwarts due to death. He considered going through the traps one by one for the fun of it, but decided shadowing directly to the mirror was a better idea. After all, not setting the traps off indicated nothing was stolen. He quickly disappeared into the dark corners of his home, nay of many existed in Grimmauld Place, and stayed covered within the shadows of the hall. He was hit with nostalgia seeing the empty room. This is where he had his first adventure that Dumblefuck set up. Honestly, how could 3 first years pass the defenses for a priceless artifact? Anyone could have stolen it. In fact, he would have if it weren't for Snape. Flamel was an idiot for trusting Dumbledore with his key to immortality. Being smart this time around, he wandlessly removed all tracing and monitoring charms on the room before stepping out of the shadows. Glancing around at the empty room, he walked to the center, his echoing footsteps slicing through the silence. He stood directly in front of the mirror as he had many times before. Harry peeked in expecting to get the stone right away before he stiffened at the reflection he saw. He was smiling, with his dads behind him. Next to him, Draco was hugging him with a bright smile. But that wasn't all. On his other side was a man. The said man had neat dark brown hair that was nearly black, perfect. Pale skin without a hint of blemish, and gorgeous shimmering ruby red eyes. But that wasn't what shocked him. The said man was holding his hand, smiling at him with love glowing in his eyes, and was kissing him. Harry could only stare at the peculiar scene. That was his deepest desire. Harry knew that man was no stranger. No, he'd seen it before, in life and in his dreams. That was the face of Tom Marvolo Riddle, the man he wants to resurrect. Harry unconsciously took a step forward and caressed the image. He understood why people wasted away in front of it. He could barely take his eyes off of the happy family. He looked so carefree, safe, warm. So complete. Harry felt a small pang of guilt that his parents were not in the mirror with him, but soon painfully understood that he accepted they were gone. Harry shook his head sadly and focused on the task. He wanted to find the stone, and not use it for himself but to help Tom. When had it become Tom in his mind anyways? He had no idea if it'd work. He could, after all, just break the enchantment, but this would be easier. He smiled a bit as he felt something heavy in his pocket. Reaching in, he felt the cold, smooth surface that he once clutched onto as Quirrell strangled him. Harry then remembered Voldemort asked him to join his side in first year. He wonders what had happened if he agreed rather than fought. He walked to the corner ready to shadow to Quirrell's office, but not before glancing back at the image. With one last look at the beautiful smirk on the figure, he tore his eyes off and shadowed into the defense classroom's office. Maybe, just maybe, that dream could come true. Glancing around as he arrived, he realized Quirrell wasn't even there. Great. Harry decided to use a point me towards Quirrell instead. Seeing the arrow point not far down the hall, he realized he was probably sleeping in the teacher quarters. Maybe Tom wasn't a morning person. He quickly shadowed over to the quarters, specifically to the bedroom. Arriving, Harry glanced around, not leaving the shadows yet. He saw Quirrell fast asleep, turban still on. Harry nearly choked out laughing as he realized the twins threw dung bombs at the turban all the time. Oh Merlin, he couldn't even begin to imagine Voldemort's reaction to such a thing. He almost felt sorry for Tom. Swiftly, he casted the death magic spell to put Quirrell into hibernation. grabbed him by the collar of his pajamas and shadowed them into the ritual room. Once there, he created some magical ropes and winded them around Quirrell, immobilizing all movement. He then grabbed the stone from his pocket and placed it in the designated circle. Sprinting, he barged into Regulus's room and hastily snatched the locket, then ran back into the room. Placing the locket down in the next circle, he took a deep breath and started the ritual. This was it, now or never. Taking the vial, he poured the ashes around the bowl in a circle. Ashes of a phoenix, you will aid another's rebirth. Harry then poured the Dementor's soul over the phoenix ashes. The silvery liquid glowed gold and started absorbing the ashes. A Dementor's soul, you will aid another's soul to heal. With that, he grabbed the knife next to him. Carefully, he sliced his palm open and filled the small bowl with blood. After it hit the rim, he healed his hand. Blood of a former enemy, now turned into ally. They shall share a bond no other understands. Harry realized the irony of this but continued the ritual. He took the ritual powder and connected it to the ring around Quirrell, the stone, and the locket towards the bowl. He decided to wake him up now, but not before putting a silencing charm. No need for distractions. Harry watched as Quirrell's eyes opened and widened at the sight of him. He uselessly wiggled and jerked trying to escape, but it was no use. Harry continued the ritual. The Philosopher's Stone, you shall bring rebirth rather than eternity. The powder connecting to the stone glowed and the stone was wrapped in the same light as the Dementor's soul. He moved on to the next. A piece of the broken soul, you shall rejoin as whole. By now, Quirrell's eyes were red, indicating Voldemort taking over. The eyes were crazed and shown confusion, but Harry ignored it. The light surrounded the locket, so he moved to the last. Lastly, a servant as sacrifice, you shall die so your master can live. At that, Quirrell took over and looked momentarily stunned before the light covered him too. Harry watched in wonder as the soul of Voldemort separated from Quirrell's body, and the small white orb hovered above the bowl of his blood. The next part was excruciating. He let out his death magic, and grabbed each piece of soul with his magic, bringing them forth in front of him. Harry closed his eyes, and let his magic roam free, its misty ribbons grabbing each piece no matter how far they were. The process was extremely tiresome, using high amounts of magic and concentration. When he opened his eyes, he watched astonished as all the orb pieces circled above the bowl. And now for the last step. And with all the pieces, you shall join back as one, body and soul whole once again. Harry took his wand out and activated the runes. Everything in the room started shining, the runes glowing different colors before all leading to the middle of the room. The blood in the bowl trailed all the lines drawn and for a moment the room flashed a blinding white. Carefully opening his eyes, breathing heavily, Harry looked forward to see a young frame, all traces of the ritual gone. With a slightly crazed laugh of delight, he scrambled over to the body. In front of him was Tom Riddle, who looked 16. The ritual would bring the person back to the purest of the soul, hence his first Horcrux. The teen, however, was extremely pale, his hair a mess, and quite skinny. Harry knew that the ritual, while would return the person, it could take weeks of recovery. Hastily, Harry spelled some soft cotton robes over the nude body. He could see the small rise of the chest, indicating a successful ritual. Tenderly, he carried the boy bridal style to a bedroom he preset up. He gently laid the figure down on the bed, tucked him under the covers, and then set up a monitoring charm. As soon as Tom woke, he would be notified to explain everything. With that, knowing how frail he was currently, he turned off the lights and let him rest. Exiting, he saw his parents looking at him expectantly with wide eyes. Harry nodded with a bright grin and they smiled back. With that, Harry headed back to bed. Completely exhausted from the ritual, Harry's dream may or may not have focused on the handsome teen he carried in his arms. Chapter 13. The only words to describe Tom as he came into consciousness was broken. The moment he woke up, all knowledge of reality in his mind shattered into irreversible pieces. His mind was a swirling storm of hazy memories. Clashing beliefs, disturbing thoughts and actions, and unstable emotions. His body felt fatigued and brittle. How had he ended up in a body anyways? His normal tidal wave of magic was nothing but a messy puddle, unable to do any wandless magic. Trying to focus on his surroundings, he took amount to see he was in a bedroom. A nice one too. The room was generally peaceful, with the silk white curtains letting in a slight breeze, pastel blue walls, and a fluffy blue carpet. Outside, the shining sun indicated it was daytime. The room slightly relaxed him, but he couldn't concentrate with all the thoughts buzzing around his head. He clutched the soft covers tensely as a knock on the door was heard. Not bothering for his response, he watched a child who looked no older than 12 enter the room. He looked wearily at the boy with raven hair and green eyes who entered as he just smiled softly at him. "Good morning, I see you are up," Harry greeted. Tom just kept staring silently. "I know you are confused, and that is understandable. I suggest you sort through your memories. You'll be spending quite a bit of time recovering." Tom's mind was whirling at the last sentence. Recovering? From what? He vaguely recalled some sort of ritual, but that was about it. Looking up at the boy, his eyes snapped up to the now familiar bright emerald eyes. You were the one who put me in some ritual," he shouted, eyes blazing. What was he playing at? The boy just stared a bit before calmly responding. "I am Harry James Potter Black Peverell, and that ritual brought you back to life, sane and whole," Harry told him without falter. Tom gave him an expression as if he were the insane one. "Sort your memories, you'll come to understand. I'll bring you some breakfast and I'll drop by for your lunch." And with that, Harry left the room, leaving a bewildered Tom in bed. Tom stared down at the breakfast tray he was handed. He was confused as hell, but his stomach was completely empty and was screaming for food. So, with that, he ate his strawberry French toast in solitude, trying to solve the puzzle of his mind. Harry closed the door and sighed. Tom was awake, but he didn't understand or remember things clearly. He'd have to give him space to bring himself together again. Tom was finally here, but what now? What if he didn't recover? What if he doesn't like him? Harry slid down the wall, hands covering his face with another sigh. This will be an interesting break. Today was Yule, so all his gifts had been sent out prior. He would be spending the dinner with Sirius and Remus opening gifts, but they would be gone beforehand to give Tom some space. Would Tom be up for dinner? He sure hoped so. Tom currently was staring blankly at the window. He remembered. He spent the next few hours in his mindscape, sorting and watching all kinds of memories. Looking through his ideas, beliefs, and plans, what he saw disgusted him. How had he fallen so low? He was an ambitious teenager. With goals and ideas, he wanted to change the world for the better. What happened to him? Well, he knew the answer to that. Each piece of soul preserved the ideas, memories, and beliefs of the time they were created. As the soul pieces got smaller, the less stable they became. The Horcruxes sure flipped his life into pieces. Perhaps this was his punishment for past deeds. As he made more Horcruxes, his mind started to crumble, actions becoming bloodthirsty and psychotic. He knew by no means was he a good person, but he wasn't that evil. He tortured his followers for no reason. He killed and tortured for fun. What good would that do? He watched as he supported the idiotic pureblood supremacy, killing innocent muggles and mudbloods just for existing. Even he wouldn't snoop that low, no matter how much he dislikes them. And oh my Salazar, he tried to kill a baby. A baby. A baby who couldn't even walk or talk yet was perceived as a threat to him. How far had he fallen to do such a despicable thing? He then recalled the horror of magic dispelling him from his body, banishing him as a spirit. So that was what happened to him. He escaped his mindscape feeling so lost and empty. The boy he saw earlier, he concluded was the baby he just saw. The boy who he ruined the life of. The boy he orphaned and tried to kill gave him a second chance. He had no clue how to feel about that. How could the boy forgive him? Why would he take care of him after all he did? The fact that the boy served his parents' murderer breakfast in bed was bewildering. These thoughts were interrupted by a series of knocks. Harry entered the room with a tray full of different sandwiches along with tea and scones. He set the tray on Tom's lap gently, smiling at him. "I see you are awake and have had time to organize your mind?" Harry lightly asked. Tom stiffly nodded. This all felt surreal to him. "I can tell you are still confused, so I'll answer any questions you may have. I promise to answer everything honestly and to the best of my knowledge," Harry told him. Tom just stared at him intently. "Why?" was all that came out. "Why what? You'll have to be specific. Why'd you save me? I was a psychopathic murderer who ruined your life and orphaned you over a stupid prophecy. How can you even look at me?" Tom vehemently ranted. Harry looked at him with soft eyes. "Because I understand. I know what it'd like to be orphaned, to be alone. Against the world. All your actions weren't your fault, it was because of the Horcruxes. You deserved a second chance," Harry answered. That answer wasn't what Tom expected, but he decided to move on. "Okay then, how? I mean, I saw myself trying to gain a body, I couldn't do it. How did you resurrect me, with a whole soul and all?" he asked, trying to wrap his head around all this. "Well, first off, let me give you an in-depth introduction. I am Harry James Potter Black Peverell, the Lord of Three Houses, a magical prodigy, and the Master of Death," Harry introduced. Tom's eyes snapped up at the last one. "This is my second life. In my first one, I killed you and later discovered, after death, that I was betrayed by those I loved. I decided then and there I'd live my own way, the way I deserved this second time," Harry continued. "I spent time learning, doing magic, and heard about you from death. I discovered your true goals and ideas. Your hopes and dreams for our future. How that dream was crushed because of one single mistake. And so, I decided to help you," Harry finished. Tom couldn't believe his ears. This has got to be a dream. This person was either a saint or an idiot. "You're joking, right?" Tom couldn't help but ask. Harry chuckled at that. "I'm afraid not, Tom." Tom stared at nothing, trying to process this. "What's going to happen to me?" he questioned nervously. He was, after all, at his mercy. He couldn't do much on his own right now and owed him a life debt. "Well, you are now under my care. I must return to Hogwarts by the end of break, however. It is currently Yule, which is why I'm here. If you would agree, I want to house you in the Chamber of Secrets. For now, you'll spend your break healing mentally, physically, and magically. You are currently frail and need a couple weeks to adjust. We can decide what to do after together," Harry informed him. "And my Horcruxes?" Tom couldn't help but know. While he understood what he did was wrong, he couldn't help but be afraid of death. Harry smiled at the paranoia. "You have one left. Every other one is back in you, but the smallest one left is currently still a Horcrux. The one you left in me." Tom gaped blankly. This boy, the baby he tried to kill, was a Horcrux. "And I happen to be immortal, so you will be too," Harry continued. This news gave him a jolt. He was immortal? Taking a couple seconds to breathe, he looked Harry in the eyes. "Harry, I apologize for what I did. Your parents, to you." Harry cut him off. "Tom, it's okay. Just get better, yeah?" Harry brushed off. Tom nodded. "Okay, Harry. Thank you for everything," he said with a hint of blush. He never apologized or thanked people before. Harry, meanwhile, was having an internal crisis of how fucking cute that was. With a nod, Harry stood up. "I'll see you soon. My dads will be home to have Yule dinner today. You are welcome to join us if you feel up for it," and with that, Harry headed out the room. Tom looked at the spot Harry was at, soon missing his company. Knowing he and him would be together for a while, he might as well meet his fathers. Tom then realized that Harry said fathers. Was he adopted? Shaking out of his stupor, he spent the next few hours rethinking his goals and beliefs. By each Horcrux his beliefs became more twisted and off the mark to the point he didn't even know what he supported. His youngest soul piece had bright ideas, but they were structureless and unclear with childhood hope. The older ones were all just insane, focusing on purity and cleansing with mass genocide. He'd have to figure all of this out soon. He decided to take a nap to recharge his low energy, giving his mind time to rest from all the revelations made. Chapter 14. Harry was apprehensive of this evening. While he trusted and loved his fathers, he wasn't aware of how they'd react to Tom. Of course, they'd be civil for his sake, but he still worried, especially with how hot-headed Sirius can be. He slipped a maroon sweater on. Despite being a Slytherin, he still had some Gryffindor pride. More like his Sirius forced him to wear red, and started heading to the kitchen while throwing on a black apron. He wanted to make dinner this Yule for his family. While he learned out of necessity rather than passion, thanks a lot Dursleys, he genuinely loved cooking. Getting a grateful thank you was also a bonus. Creature, like most house elves, made a huge fuss out of him cooking, claiming it was his duty. But Harry simply ordered him to allow him to cook, and Creature's despair, he had to obey. Of course, he had Creature stock up on some premium quality products to stop his sulking. In the kitchen, he opened the fridge and pantry to take out the ingredients. With that, he started washing vegetables, humming away and getting absorbed by the task. Tom was currently dreading the coming dinner. He had the revelation that the two men he was meeting had every reason to crucio the fuck out of him, and he honestly deserved it too. Despite this, he would still go. Sane or not, the former Dark Lord refused to back down. He was no coward. Well, perhaps when facing death, but apparently that isn't an issue anymore thanks to Harry. He had a lot to thank Harry for, even if his actions still mind-boggled him. He braced himself and pushed off the mattress weakly, slowly getting out of bed. His limbs felt brittle and shaky, and his body moved lethargically with constant dull ache. He felt unbelievably weak. He glanced at the clothes Harry left on the nightstand for his use. They were Muggle clothes. It was a fluffy blue and white sweater with silky white pajama bottoms. Harry seemed to love matching him with blue, judging by his room and clothes. He slipped it on tenderly and stared at a full-body mirror on the wall, running his hand into his unbrushed hair. This was so new to him. He never ever dressed so casually nor felt this nervous for anything. He gazed into blood-red eyes. Apparently not all the side effects were erased. But despite this single similarity, this wasn't him. Yet it was his new reality. When was the last time he felt all these emotions? These feelings he locked away so long ago, that he shunned to protect himself in the orphanage. He sighed and dropped his hand to his side. Might as well get this over with. And with that he steeled himself and made his way down the stairs for the first time. Tom made it to the bottom when an amazing aroma hit him, along with soft humming. Glancing to his left where they both came from, he followed the sound, hearing it increase in volume each step. When Tom arrived at the target, he was quite surprised. It seemed he was in a kitchen, but rather than a house elf preparing the meal like most upper class had, he saw Harry humming away with an apron as he seared some vegetables. There was a huge smile prominent on Harry's face and a sparkle of passion glowing in his eyes. One like his own whenever he was absorbed by something. He grimaced. Those joys usually revolved around death and torture these past years. Trying not to think about it, Tom cleared his throat. Harry jumped, slightly startled, and a small blush crept up his face. He was always uncomfortable about people watching him cook, probably because the Dursleys breathed down his neck making sure he didn't burn anything. Coughing awkwardly, Harry greeted him. Good afternoon, Tom. Dinner should be ready soon. The dinner table is on the right of here, but you could stay if you'd like. Harry wasn't sure why he offered to let Tom stay when he hated being watched. He settled that it was out of mannerism. Tom nodded and sat down on a chair against the wall. Harry glanced for a second, still bemused that the Darkest Lord of all time was currently sane and whole, leaning over a chair watching him cook. He shook his head a bit, trying to ignore the presence watching him, and continued with the meal. Oddly enough, Tom's attention didn't really bother him much. Tom watched as Harry moved with grace, one pan to another and trays in and out of the oven. Harry was practically gliding with his swift movements, not a single flaw or mistake as he seasoned, chopped, and flipped. As a teen he thought cooking was menial servant work. Honestly, he still thought that, but seeing Harry with such skill and precision, he wasn't so sure. After what felt like half an hour, Tom now saw a variety of perfectly displayed dishes, scents drifting through the kitchen. He heard Harry sigh in satisfaction before waving a hand over everything. Harry confused him. He hadn't used magic once during the cooking process until now. It wasn't because of underage magic, he performed an entirely illegal and dark ritual for Merlin's sake. And yet he did everything by hand without thought. He watched in bewilderment as this 11-year-old boy now casually casted wandless magic without a sweat. Even knowing he wasn't really 11, it was quite an impressive feat for his small stature. Harry gazed into his eyes as if reading his soul and smiled. Dinner's ready now, so let's head to the table, yes? I believe Siri and Remy are here already. And with that he strolled towards the dining room, dozens of dishes floating behind him. Tom silently followed. Sirius and Remus were currently sitting at the table waiting for Harry, knowing he hated people watching him cook. They both loved watching Harry as he practically danced around the kitchen, but they could tell he was uncomfortable with it. They were quite apprehensive about meeting this Lord Voldemort, both fidgeting uncomfortably in their seats. Sane as Harry claimed or not, to them it was the same person. This man had killed many of their friends and family, wreaked havoc on the wizarding world, and tortured innocents for twisted pleasure. Even with Harry's reassurance one couldn't be too sure. Sirius may or may not have his wand closely tucked in his holster. However, for Harry's sake they'd reserve judgment for later. They knew how nerve-wracked he was for this meeting, and as Harry's parents they picked up on his extreme compassion for Tom, as Harry referred to him as. Harry could make up all the excuses he wants, but a normal human wouldn't resurrect their parents' killer only to house them in a personally decorated room while serving him breakfast in bed. But then again, Harry wasn't exactly the definition of normal. Harry clearly cared about him, even if they didn't understand why. They just hoped this Tom wouldn't hurt Harry in the future. Harry had been through so much after all, they didn't need his already cracked soul to be hit with a bombarda. Their worries ceased and turned into bemused puzzlement when Harry walked in and set things down on the table. Behind him was a teenager. Said teen was looking down nervously with his dark hair covering his expression, his hands clamped together in front of him while wearing a pastel blue and white sweater. This seriously couldn't be the Dark Lord, could it? The only indication that this was the snake-faced homicidal maniac was the eerie red eyes peeking through his hair. Once Harry finished setting things down, he pulled Tom by the hand to sit next to him, opposite of his parents. Tom was hesitantly led over and took a seat, still avoiding eye contact. Harry noticed both his parents gaping like a fish. He may or may not have forgot to mention Tom was going to be a teenager. "Sue," Harry started, gaining the attention of his parents who still looked confused as hell. "Siri, Remy, this is Tom." Harry gestured towards Tom, who awkwardly waved, looking through his bangs at them. He then gestured to his parents. "Tom, the sane one on the left is Remus Lupin. The crazy one is Sirius Black." To that statement Sirius looked affronted. "Excuse me, Har, I am not crazy," Sirius haughtily replied. "Yes, you are Sirius," came a duo reply from Harry and Remus. Sirius started babbling about the unfairness, while Remus and Harry shook their heads at his antics. Harry looked over at Tom, who was sitting stiffly, chewing slowly on a cherry tomato. Glancing at his parents, he nodded towards Tom discreetly. Remus seemed to get the hint first. "So, Tom, how have you been feeling?" Remus asked lightly. Tom froze mid-bite and put his fork down. Remembering his manners, he braced himself and looked up. "Better than this morning, I suppose." "The room is lovely, by the way," Tom replied quietly, though still pleasantly. Remus decided the response was positive and continued. "That's good to hear. Harry spent a long time planning that room for you," Remus nonchalantly added. Harry started spluttering. "I did not," he denied indignantly, crossing his arms with a huff. Sirius let out a barked laugh, head flown back. Don't deny it, pup. The first 2 days of break you were changing the interior of that room through the entire rainbow with every layout and furniture item possible. You ran to both me and Mooney every few minutes for our opinions, only to disregard them and change it again. Serious. Exclaimed. Harry blushed pink, his defensive posture diminishing. Tom stared at Harry before letting out genuine laughter. Both Sirius and Remus stared at him, completely bewildered that this kid was the darkest lord of all time and was laughing at their statements. Tom turned slightly to Harry with a grin and a slight head tilt. Well, thank you, Harry, the room is quite nice. I do enjoy the layout of it. And the color. You did a wonderful job, Tom complimented, remembering his charm. Harry glanced over and saw truth in those gorgeous red eyes. Somehow, he blushed darker. Dumbledore did say Tom Riddle was a charming boy, but Merlin, did he have a way with words? Giving an awkward cough, Harry changed the conversation. The rest of the dinner went by smoothly, with casual small talk about many different topics. Turns out Tom Riddle was quite knowledgeable in every form of magic possible, not that it was surprising. Harry found himself enjoying the conversations, and quite glad that Remus and Sirius seemed okay with Tom. Tom was also enjoying himself. He happily chatted about all kinds of magical subjects. Unlike with his followers, he was currently able to be himself wholeheartedly. It was rare to have the type of debates he was having with Harry. His followers were always too scared to speak up about their own opinions. Once dinner was finished, they all headed over to the living room for presents. Thanks to magic, all the gifts from everyone were already in the center of the room. Sirius and Remus both sat on the love seat near the lit fireplace, while Harry sat on the carpet in front of the gifts, in which Tom imitated sitting across him. Tom, of course, wasn't expecting any gifts, and judging by the adults, they weren't expecting many either. He assumed they would spend most of the time watching Harry, which he was fine with. Harry gave him a second chance and immortality. If that wasn't the ultimate gift, he didn't know what is. Harry smiled as he opened his gifts from friends and some obligatory gifts from students. Tom, Remus, and Sirius would make some occasional comments on them. There was plenty of chocolate, books, many of which he had, and a few clothing items. When he got to Draco's, he smiled. The box was sleek matte black with a gold ribbon. It screamed luxury in his opinion. Opening it, inside was a gorgeous earring. Draco knew about his fond obsession with earrings. Picking it up, he put it under the lights to get a better look. It was a small emerald shard with gold and silver vines twisted around it. No doubt it was handmade and quite expensive. He picked up the note attached. Dear Harry, Happy Yule. I'm so glad I met you this year. You were the best friend I could ever ask for. The earring has some magical properties. It allows you to see through disillusions and invisibility charms. I hope you like it. It was handmade by a private jeweler in France. Yours, Draco. Harry smiled at the note and put on the earring. He conjured a small mirror and looked at the reflection. That looks good on you, pup. I'm guessing it is from the Malfoy kid? Sirius guessed. Harry gave nod with a bright smile. Draco always knows what to get me, Harry said. Tom thought for a moment. He vaguely remembered a Draco Malfoy, but he could guess that it was Lucius's son. It seemed he were close to Harry. He wondered when they'd meet. Did Harry tell Draco about him? His thoughts were halted when Harry unshrunk something from his pocket and handed it to him. Tom took it and watched as Harry gave his fathers a similarly decorated box. Sirius and Remus started opening theirs, while Tom held on to it. Harry smiled at him. It's a gift from me. I hope you like it. If not, you don't have to keep it, Harry told him, before turning around to see his father's reactions to the gift. Sirius and Remus opened their gifts at the same time and smiled, holding up twin mirrors. Hey pup, I know I'm gorgeous, but I already know it, Sirius joked cheekily. Remus smacked Sirius on the arm, earning a yelp. Oh, shut it, Siri. These are clearly enchanted to do something. Keep your ego in check, Remus scolded, setting down his box. Harry gave Remus a grin. 5 points. They are two-way mirrors. This way we can communicate during Hogwarts rather than through mail, Harry explained. Sirius put down the golden-rimmed mirror and they both gave Harry a loving hug. Tom looked at the family from the side with mixed emotions. This was the type of thing he always wanted, growing up as an orphan. But he gave up on the dream. So long ago, he wasn't sure how to react to it now. Was he going to be part of this someday? Harry seemed to sense the emotional turmoil, as he pulled away and stared at him expectantly. Remembering he had a parcel in hand, Tom hesitantly unwrapped it. He never got gifts in the orphanage, and all the gifts he got later were mandatory by his followers. This was different. Looking the box, he gasped. It was his diary, the locket, and ring, all in mint condition. Despite what others thought, the first 3 Horcrux objects held significant value to him. The ones along the way, however, were out of greed, only used because they were expensive artifacts. He tenderly picked up the diary and hugged it to his chest. That diary was with him throughout his school years. It meant a lot to him. Harry watched Tom's reaction to the diary. In his last life, he wondered why the evil Dark Lord would carry around a diary, but now he understood. No one was born evil, and Tom was no exception. The diary was how he vented out, how he survived his emotional distress. The other 2 were his birthright, something he held on to. Being an orphan as well, it hurts not knowing much of where you came from, and anything of theirs meant the world. He could concur from the cloak and map. Speaking of, Harry should plan something for the twins. Tom looked at Harry and unexpectedly pulled him into an embrace. Thank you, Harry, for everything. This is more than I deserve, Tom whispered to him. Harry, who froze up for a moment, hugged back tightly. You do deserve it. You grew up in just as terrible terms as I did the first time. Let's both live this the way we want, Harry replied, and with a few more seconds, they broke apart. Looking over his shoulder, Harry groaned as he saw Sirius's smug face. Don't, Harry warned. Sirius put his hands up in surrender, but still looked smug. Remus smiled. It is late now, how about we head to bed? Remus suggested. Harry glanced at Tom, who looked fatigued, and nodded. He knew Tom needed time to recover. Okay then, good night, dads, and with that Harry, followed by Tom, headed up the stairs. When they got to the top, Harry turned to Tom. I hope in time you can consider us family. You'll be stuck with us for a while after all, Harry stated with a smile. With that, he walked towards the door across from Tom and gently closed the door with a soft, good night. Tom stood a moment thinking about his words before going to his own room. Well, perhaps he would get that family he dreamed of after all. He wondered if he truly deserved it. And to that thought, he got ready for bed. Chapter 15. Tom started fitting in right at home after Yule. While he spent most of his time with Harry, he had occasional conversations with Sirius and Remus. Harry spent most of the holidays helping Tom get stronger, magically and physically, while Tom spent his time alone to mend his mind, mentally. Tom was doing quite well, at least as well as someone could, after coming to terms that he turned into a psychopathic Dark Lord. He apologized numerous times to Harry and to Sirius and Remy, despite Harry brushing it off. Sirius and Remus, while were okay with Tom, they weren't quite ready to forgive. The 2 were still slightly wary around him, but they still accepted him in the group. To that, Harry was extremely thankful. Currently, Harry and Tom were sitting together on the couch while Harry explained death magic. The spell I used to knock you out for the ritual was a death magic spell. It puts its target into a death-like state, Harry told him. Tom looked at him curiously. What is the difference between this and the draft of living death? He inquired with bright, wondering eyes. Unlike the draft, the spell also stops heartbeat and breathing. One would truly think you are dead. However, it also preserves the body so it won't decay, only temporarily shut down, Harry explained. Tom nodded thoughtfully. Is there a counter, or will it wear off on its own? It doesn't wear off. The only way to remove it is with the counter curse. Could you teach me an incantation for them? Actually, Death magic doesn't use incantations, rather it uses will and power. Unfortunately, mortals cannot use death magic without killing themselves in the process. Unlike me, their souls cannot handle the power and it'd be ripped apart. So is necromancy not really death magic? No, it isn't. They are mortals who use soul magic on the dead. Death magic is a lot more than that. They can't even access a fraction of soul magic. Either. So Horcruxes are soul magic, even if it revolves around death? Precisely, the soul passes on after death, so soul magic ends up tampering with death. Harry quite enjoyed their conversations like this. Tom was always curious about different topics and had a strong thirst for knowledge. Tom was looking at the wall with a contemplating expression. In the silence, Tom's eyebrows furrowed and he turned to him. Hey Harry, during Yule you mentioned Draco Malfoy. Have you told him about me yet? Tom asked. Harry stiffened a little bit before giving a small sigh. I haven't told him anything actually. He has no idea about me being the Master of Death. I wasn't sure when I should tell him either. I'm not sure how he'd react towards it, Harry honestly replied. Looking down, Tom gave a thoughtful nod. Well, you two are close, right? Perhaps you should tell him soon. I am going to Hogwarts with you, so he's got to know, Tom advised. Harry nodded. I guess. Are you up to meeting him so soon though? I know you still are recovering, and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable, Harry told him, slightly worried. Tom gave him a grateful look. I'll be fine. I should meet him after all. He seems important to you, Tom said. Tom wasn't lying either. The past few days of recovery went quite well. He could move around quite well and his mind was stable. Harry nodded slightly. Okay. How about tomorrow? He questioned, to which Tom agreed. Harry wrote a hasty letter to Draco later that day. Draco was on a couch reading a book when Hedwig appeared through the manor into his room. Looking up, he saw a letter from Harry. Hastily, he grabbed it from the landed owl and ripped it open, full of anticipation. When he read it, he gave a small frown. Dre, this is sudden, but could you come over tomorrow as early as possible? It is quite important. There are things I need to explain to you and someone for you to meet. I'll pick you up in front of your manor if you can. Harry Draco blinked for a moment before looking for his father. It isn't like Harry to be so spontaneous. He'd never send an invitation out on the whim unless it was extremely important. Efficiently, he informed his father he'd be meeting Harry with no context, and with that headed back to his room. He hoped Harry was okay. He also wondered who he'd be meeting. He's seen both his parents and last time he checked he knew all of Harry's friends. Timeskip Draco quickly got ready and headed to the front gate. He didn't have to wait long when Harry appeared out of thin air through a dark corner of the hedges. Draco jumped, expression startled. That wasn't apparition. No. Apparition made a pop sound and looked like a small vortex. Harry just appeared out of thin air without any warning. That wasn't normal, not at all. He barely noticed as Harry grabbed his arm gently and they both disappeared, in a feeling that was a lot more comfortable than sighed. Apparition. Draco didn't see his father staring with the same amount of bewilderment as he left. Lucius had seen the young boy apparate before. And that wasn't it. What was that? He appeared completely out of nowhere and disappeared into the shadows with his son. He shook his head. There was a lot more to that boy than he let on. With that thought, he strolled back into the manor. Draco appeared in the middle of a house. Glancing around the space, he assumed it was Harry's home. Looking over to the boy in question, he started firing questions. Harry, what in Merlin's name was that? That wasn't apparition. Are you okay? Is something wrong, which is why you called me? Who is this person? What are you here to tell me? Harry looked down nervously and swallowed the lump in his throat. Dre. I've been keeping something from you. Something quite big. Draco didn't like the sound of that but didn't interrupt. I was worried how you'd react and put it off. The person you'll be meeting convinced me to tell you. Draco stayed silent, thinking about the words. Okay, so what is it? Draco impatiently asked. He hated being kept in the dark. Harry took a breath and looked into his friend, practically brother's eyes. "Let's start with an introduction," he stated, repeating what he told Tom. "You know me as Harry James Potter Black Peverell, Lord of Three Houses. But I have another title. I'm formerly just Harry James Potter, the boy who lived in the Master of Death." Draco froze for a good long while. "You're kidding, right? Master of Death, like in that children's story?" Draco laughed nervously, as if hoping it wasn't true. Harry winced at the tone. "No, I'm not. This is my second life as Harry Potter. I've already met you in the past one," Harry told him quietly. Draco's nervousness transitioned to fuming anger. "Why hadn't you told me sooner? If you knew me previously, you should know you could trust me. Don't you trust me?" Draco demanded, fist clenched. He was annoyed and a bit hurt. He thought Harry would trust him with such a thing sooner. Harry only looked down guiltily. "Well, the thing is, we weren't exactly friends back then," he hinted while rubbing his neck. Draco gave him a suspicious gaze. "What do you mean not friends?" The way Harry said it scared him. "As in, we kinda, well, hated each other," Harry mumbled out. Draco frowned. "What? They hated each other?" "He hated his best friend." He looked at Harry as if expecting him to confess it was a joke, but Harry kept his head lowered. Draco felt a pang in his heart. "What? You're serious?" Draco questioned shakily, his shoulders slumped. Harry went over and embraced him. "That's in the past, Dre, or well, future sort of. I trust you, I really do. I feared how you'd react to what I'm doing, what I did," Harry murmured into Draco's hair. Draco creased his eyebrows. "What he did?" "What you did? Does that have to do with why I'm here?" Draco asked. Harry nodded. "The person you're meeting, well, let's say you will question my sanity." Harry put it wryly. And with that, he beckoned Draco to follow him. Draco gazed around the hallways. The house looked quite nice. He wondered where they exactly were. Harry seemed to read his mind. "This is a Black family home, Grimmauld Place. Your mother most likely would recognize it," Harry informed him. Draco nodded. It made sense. Harry was Lord Black after all. They seemed to enter a small living room. There, Draco saw a young teen. A very handsome teenager, casually sat by the fireplace with a book. "Tom. Draco's here." Harry beckoned Draco into the room, and Draco sat across Harry, who sat next to Tom. This Tom person looked up from his book at him with a charming smile. "Nice to meet you, I'm Tom Riddle." Tom stuck his hand out with Draco. Who shook it? Draco noted the surname Riddle, so not a pureblood. Not that he minded. Harry convinced him that mannerism spoke louder than blood. "Pleasure, though I'm not sure why Harry is so nervous about this meeting." Tom laughed musically and Harry let out an exasperated laugh. "No, Harry is right to worry. My name may be Tom Riddle, but you and your father know me as Lord Voldemort." With that, Draco's neck snapped over to look at Tom, then back at Harry, who both looked dead serious. With that, Draco fainted. Honestly, that'd be my reaction." Draco scanned his surroundings as he gained consciousness. He just dreamed that Harry told him he was the Master of Death and the handsome teenager was Voldemort. At least he thought it was dream until he faltered, seeing said teen right there staring at him in amusement. "Harry, please tell me you're playing an elaborate joke," Draco begged desperately. Harry shook his head. "Nope, he is Voldemort, or previously was Voldemort. He is now sane and whole," Harry informed. Draco nodded, still feeling faint. "Okay. So explain to me why in Salazar's name is he?" Draco pointed a frantic figure at Tom, who stared at it with amusement. A teenager who looks no older than a Hogwarts student. Harry gave a small sigh. Harry spent the next 15 minutes explaining what he missed out on. By the end, Draco's brain was on the brink of combustion. His best friend in the whole world was the Master of Death, who was living his second life and resurrected the Dark Lord as a sane and handsome teenager. So, what now? Draco questioned, honestly not even trying to understand his friend's motives. "Well, Tom has to recover before we decide what to do. He'll be coming to Hogwarts with us, but he'll be staying in the Chamber of Secrets." Draco gaped at the last statement. "The chamber? As in the place Salazar Slytherin built?" "Chamber as in—" "Yes, Chamber of Secrets built by Salazar Slytherin himself," Tom stated. He started in a lecturing voice. "I found the chamber when I was 16. It is hidden in the girls' bathroom and activated through Parseltongue from the sinks. Inside there is a basilisk." Harry made a funny noise. Tom glanced at him. Harry coughed slightly. "I kind of killed it in second year last time." Both boys gave him disbelieving stares. Harry sheepishly smiled. "Tom's Horcrux possessed someone to open the chamber. He called the basilisk on me. I had no choice." Harry shrugged out. Tom closed his eyes for a second before continuing. "Anyways, the chamber is similar to a dwelling past the actual chamber. There's a bedroom along with library and potions lab. I'll be living there to recover," Tom finished. Harry turned to face Draco. "I know this is a lot of information, and I have to ask you not to reveal any of this yet. Tom is far too weak magically to call any Death Eaters, and we don't want Dumbles to get a hold of this information." Draco gave him a confident gaze. "I will not tell anyone, not even my father, about this, I swear. I wouldn't betray you like that," Draco told him. Harry smiled softly. "Thanks, Dre." Harry got up and hugged him again. Tom looked at the two, not wanting to interrupt. He vaguely wondered why he felt a bit sad seeing the two so close. Perhaps he was used to being the center of Harry's attention. Not that his attention should matter that much, he was only helping him recover after all. After the two finally broke apart, Draco realized he had to head home. Harry grabbed Draco and the two disappeared. Tom stared at the spot the two left for a long moment. What was he feeling? I'll be starting another story soon. This story will stay my priority and the new one will update slowly, but keep that in mind. No, it'll not be a Tomary or Dark Harry, it will be a Marauder-era time travel. Chapter 16. The bittersweet moment arrived. For Harry to return to Hogwarts. While he would miss his father's greatly, he was also excited to return. Even if it meant returning to Dumbledore's annoying watch. He hadn't approached him directly yet, but he could tell he wanted to. He was quite apprehensive when it came to Tom, but he had faith no one would catch him. Harry was currently packing his belongings along with Tom into his luggage. Bringing Tom wasn't all that hard, not when he has such a spacious trunk. Seriously, why do they not do luggage checks? That could have prevented the entire Chambers incident, or any dark artifact for that matter. However, in this case it was quite convenient. Tom was happily inside the library compartment of his trunk reading his collection of rare scripts. Closing his trunk, he took Hedwig and Tenebris and walked downstairs. He saw both his fathers looking at him solemnly but with a smile. He smiled back and held on to them. Within an instant they were surrounded by the bustling of King's Cross Station. Harry gave his fathers a big hug as they came close to the train. "Be good and try to avoid doing something crazy, cub," Remus said to him, to which Harry chuckled a bit. "I promise not to get caught," he cheekily replied with mischievous eyes. Sirius gave him a grin and a pat on the back. "Make havoc, Har. Don't listen to grumpy old Remy," Sirius instructed him before getting slapped and reprimanded by Remus. Harry laughed at their antics and waltzed onto the train as the two bickered. Honestly, it was like they were a married couple. Hauling his trunk, he headed to the back compartments. Taking a seat and wandlessly levitating his things to the rack, he sighed and took out a book on ancient runes. His mind, however, wandered to the person who he was smuggling in his trunk. He wondered how he and Tom would communicate throughout the day. What if he needed him and he didn't know? Perhaps he should charm something so they could contact each other for emergencies. He didn't want Tom to be hurt, or caught, or anything else that could happen. What would happen if he was? His worrying was interrupted as Draco came into the apartment along with Blaze and Pansy in tow. He of course held his mask firmly on and greeted them with a manneristic smile. They spent the next few minutes thanking each other for gifts and discussing their holidays. Harry of course didn't mention resurrecting Tom. He liked the two but didn't trust them like he did Draco. After a while, they drifted off doing their own thing. But not before Draco gave him an expectant look. Harry gave a subtle nudge of his head towards his trunk, to which Draco understood and nodded. The ride was quiet for the rest of the time, the four of them exchanging occasional words. They soon arrived at the station and they all headed to the carriages. He never understood why first years went on boat for the sorting. It was inconvenient compared to carriages. Walking over, he smiled and dropped his things inside before jumping out again. He headed to the gorgeous winged horse that were pulling the carriages. With a soft look, he gently and slowly raised his hand and pet the Thestral's muzzle. The skeletal horse leaned in appreciatively, making soft appreciating noises. After a couple seconds, he re-entered the carriage, only to face three bewildered eyes gazing at him. "Why were you patting air?" Pansy blurted out. Harry laughed. "That wasn't air, the carriages are pulled by Thestrals," he informed them. Pansy and Blaze looked confused before Draco gasped. "Really? I never knew they pulled the carriages, Father never told me," Draco exclaimed. "What are you on about? Thestrals?" Blaze questioned confused. Harry turned to him. "Yeah, Thestrals. They are black-winged skeletal horses. They are said to be an omen of death, as only those who've seen death can see them. But they're actually quite friendly and love human attention." The two went quiet to the part where you'd have to see death. The ride was slightly downcast after that, silent but peaceful. Arriving back at the school, they got their things and headed through the castle gates. Everything was so beautiful, a thin layer of white snow covering the premises. Well, it was time for Phase 2. Harry headed to the Slytherin dungeons alongside his friends, but after dropping off his pets, he grabbed his trunk and headed out. He was met by FW questioning looks. As he left he heard Draco saying he was going to the library for more books and needed his trunk for storage. Nice save. Deciding not to risk getting caught, as soon as he left the common room he shadowed directly into the lavatory, not noticing Onyx's eyes peering at him suspiciously as he disappeared. Harry shadowed directly into the chamber. Even with its strong apparition wards they couldn't protect against his shadowing. He made his way to the middle of the room, the clanking of his boots on the cold tile floor echoing. With that, he unlocked his trunk. Harry smiled at the sight inside. Tom was leaning against the bookshelf asleep, a book half in his hand. His hair was slightly ruffled as he slumped backwards, with one knee tucked in. His face was so calm and so peaceful. Harry let out a small giggle before tapping him slightly on the shoulder. "Tom," he called quietly, "we're in the chamber." Tom groggily opened his eyes as he ran a hand through his messed up hair. Gazing up, he saw vibrant green eyes staring at him. He stretched a bit then slowly stood up. "That was pleasant. You have a wonderful collection, Harry," Tom said with a sleepy closed-eye smile. Harry bit his lip, trying not to smile too brightly. "I'm glad you liked it. Now, it is your turn, Mr. Heir of Slytherin. We have a basilisk to handle." Tom gave a more awake and serious nod. "Of course, Harry, close your eyes and stand behind me." Harry complied immediately, shutting his eyelids and gently linking onto Tom's arm. He didn't seem to notice Tom's breath hitch. He wasn't used to any sort of touch, not unless it was a violent one from the orphanage matrons. But he was adjusting to Harry's touch. Tom relaxed after a moment and straightened up, looking over at the stone statue. Dollar, speak to me. The greatest of the Hogwarts $4, he hissed out in Parseltongue. Harry felt a shiver down his spine as Tom spoke the language of snakes. Yes, he understood it as English, but Parcel always sound smoother with rich tones. The statue's mouth rumbled then split apart, and from what Harry could tell the mouth completely opened as the sound stopped. Tom felt a sense of déjà vu as the basilisk exited the new opening. The basilisk's golden yellow eyes spotted Tom and seemed to glow brighter, the long scaly body coming to a halt directly in front of him. Dollar, master. You are back. Dollar, the venomous snake hissed oppily before rearing its body, spotting Harry behind him. Dollar, who is the boy master? You never bring others. Dollar. Dollar, that is Harry. He is my friend. Do not harm him. Dollar, Tom warned, as he ushered Harry forward, hand on his back. Tom watched as the basilisk shut a pair of eyelids, and the once golden yellow became dull. You can open your eyes, Harry, Tom told him. Harry hesitantly opened his eyes and looked up. He didn't want to admit it, but he was uneasy being here. Being down here with Tom and the basilisk brought back painful memories. Even if it weren't the same, Harry gave a shudder remembering the beast attacking him and puncturing his arm, and him stabbing Tom's diary. Harry gave a coy smile to the giant snake. Dollar, nice to meet you, oh great one, dollar, he hissed out tentatively. The basilisk leaned closer, the sound similar to a rattle trailing. Dollar, oh, a speaker. Wonderful to meet you, Harry. I am Alessia. Good job. Master, you picked well. Dollar, Tom choked as Harry blushed slightly, looking away. Both of their minds took a turn to a certain implication. Tom gave an awkward cough. Dollar, Alessia. I will be staying here for a while with you. Harry will frequently visit. I suggest you keep your eyelids down, though Harry will still live if